Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit, Ineye Ojira Da, Mesinde Ojira Po Kwesi Ra Nehem Pata Akan. Akwamumai Maruka Etipi Mu Ojira Po. That means greeting to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day. My name is Ojirapo Kwesi Ra Nehem Pata Akan. Ojirapo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in once again. For those individuals who are on the phone line, if you want to have a question or you have a comment, just hit the number 1, and we can see that your hand is raised. For individuals who are in the chat room, you must log in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for a username very quickly in Blog Talk, and then you can interact in the chat room. We're going to put up some links for article and a couple of our publications. So the first one is, what does it mean to be Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit? Check that out. We also have Afuraka, Afuraitkait, the origin of the term Africa. I'm going to put that link up. And then we also have Maat and Falsehood, our book Divine Law and Divine Hate. We put that link up in the chat room. And we're also going to put the link up for the publications page where you can find all of the publications. Okay, so for individuals who are new, we have 3 weekly shows. Joada, Monday, we have Akanfo Nanasom, Ancient, Authentic Akan, Ancestral Religion, where we focus specifically on the expression of Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, and Ancestral Religion, or African Ancestral Religion, expressed via Akan culture, where we deal with it from an authentic perspective. There's a great deal of false information, misinformation regarding Akan religion, Akan ancestral religion, Akan spirituality, and so forth. So we focus specifically on Akan culture, and of course we are Akan, specifically Akwamu Akan, so we focus on that in detail. We bring out information dealing with the nature of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and the Great Father, the various Abosom, the various divinities, the Nananom Nsamampo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and their relationship to us, the Kra and Krawa, the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity that dwells in the head region. We just had a 7-part series on the spiritual organs within Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African people, black people. So we talked about the Kra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the Okra, Okrawa. We talked about the Bra, the Ba in ancient Kemet and Bayat. The Okra and Okrawa is the Ka and Kaida in ancient Kemet. We talked about the Ab and Hati, the spiritual heart and heart-lung complex. We talked about the Aku, or the Hun in Akan culture, which is the physical seat of the intuition, the Hun. That divine wisdom is the pineal gland. It's called Eku in ancient Kemet. It's called Ehun, Kun in Akan. We talked about the Sahu, the spirit body, which is called Sun Sun in Akan. We talked about the Samai, as well as the Sun Suma, which is the spiritual emanation of the physical body. When somebody makes the transition, that Samai is what people would call the apparition, or the quote-unquote ghostly figure, that electromagnetic body that the spirit takes up a residence in to operate through. And then, of course, the Kahibit in ancient Kemet is a term for that, as well as the shoot. And that's not only that form, but also the shadow, but also it generates the aura. And then we talked about the Honam yesterday, which is actually the physical body, which is the physical vessel that contains the spirit body of these various spiritual organs. So we went into detail about that and various aspects of our culture. Coming up, we're going to be dealing with the various Abosom, the forces in nature that govern the solar, lunar, planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week in our Akan culture. So that's going to be coming up soon. But we're always dealing specifically with Akanfo Nanasom, ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion, on Joada on Monday. Tuesdays is today. ODWIRA means purification. On Wednesdays, Awukuda or Akuada, we have Ekua, Marketplace Day, where we promote a Afurakani or Afuraitkait business, service, product, organization, institution, bring individuals on who have their own businesses and so forth, and organizations to share what they do with regard to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community, to serve the community, but at the same time maintain our ancestral values through their work. So that's on Ekwada or Marketplace Day. So today is ODWIRA. ODWIRA means purification. In the Akan language, it also means a celebration of purification. So ODWIRA means to purify, to cleanse. ODWIRA is the noun aspect, the noun form, which means purification. The celebration of purification for many Akanfo is the New Year celebration, which most Akanfo, if they're not brainwashed, following the New Year on January 1st, only the brainwashed amongst our population follow the New Year on January 1st. Nothing's new at the dead of winter, at the darkest time of the year. Typically, around August, September, October, in that region, around the time of the autumn or Atemet equinox, that's when we have the New Year's celebration. It's the end of the warm cycle, the beginning. It's a harvest cycle, but it's also a seeding time. So it's the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. So we typically have that traditionally around that time. In Akwamu Mine, Amarukai Tifimu, and the Akwamu Nation in North America, we always have our 7-day ODWIRA celebration, which is our New Year's celebration, the 6 days leading up to the equinox, the autumn equinox, Atemet equinox, and that first day of fall is the first day of our new year, which this year landed on September 22nd. So that was the first day of our new year of 13,015. Of course, we do not trace time to 2015 because 2015 years ago there was no character walking around named Jesus, Yeshua, Yahawashah, whatever people want to call these fictional characters. He didn't exist at all, of any form or any race. So we do not use a fake calendar based on a fictional cartoon character to measure time. We're in the midst of a 26,000-year cycle, which is an Afuraitkaitnit or a great year, since we're in the midst of that 26,000-year cycle, hence the beginning of the year is beginning with 13,000. And our year began September 22nd, 13,015. Of course, a little bit more than 3 months before the beginning of the pseudo-New Year of January 1st, which they will call 2015. So ODWIRA means purification. It also means a celebration of purification, which is our New Year celebration. In ancient Kemet and Kanat, so-called Egypt and Nubia, the term Jida means purification, to purify, to cleanse. It also means a celebration of purification. So it is the same term with the same meanings, with the same function from ancient times, and we carried that, of course, and the rest of our culture as well. This is just one example. We carried it with us when we migrated from ancient Kanat, ancient Nubia, ancient Kemet, Egypt. We migrated west, reestablished our culture, reestablished the ancient Akana Empire, and after Muslim invasions over 1,000 years ago, some of our people migrated from the ancient empire of Akana or Ghana, moved south, and reestablished Akana or Akan civilization further into the savanna regions and into the forest belt, which is today's Ivory Coast and Ghana. And we reestablished culture there and continued our practices, our ritual practices, our cultural structures, our cultural institutions, governmental structures, and so forth. And then some of our people a few hundred years ago in the midst of war were captured as prisoners of war from those regions and forced into North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean and Europe during what we call the Musul Kessies, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, and this is how we got over here. So we just want to show that continuity of culture, of course, language, of ritual practices, and so forth. So Ojira meaning purification, Ojira meaning a celebration of purification. We carry these concepts, practices, cultures with us wherever we have gone, even into the Western Hemisphere. So when we deal with Ojira, and we're talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, meaning African ancestral religion, which is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So, in essence, the definition of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law, meaning through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we restore balance. We reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, to hate, to repel in order to restore balance to our lives. So it's the expansive and contractive pole of ancestral religion is dealing with the incorporation of law and the restoration of balance. In order to incorporate law and to restore balance, you must engage the process of jira, or purification. Jira, purification, as we say, operationalizes nanason. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. So this is what we focus on Tuesdays, Abinada, and we talk about various aspects of ancestral religion and its purification. There's misinformation not only in the Western Hemisphere with people who have embraced ancestral culture, embraced ancestral religion, embraced the Akan tradition, embraced the Yoruba tradition, embraced the Bakongo tradition, embraced the Igbo tradition, their ancestral traditions. Not only is there misinformation because of infection from white culture, but there's also a great deal of misinformation and infection on the continent with continental Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, whether they be priests, priestesses, kings, queen mothers, elders, eldresses, whatever. Over 1,000 years ago, when we talked about the trek of the Akanfo, the Akan people going from the east to the west, when we reestablished the empire of Akana or Ghana over a couple of thousand years ago, well, we were there. Our culture was flourishing. Those Muslim invasions from brainwashed Negroes, some of them in alliance with white Arabs, Fulani, as well as others, invading, embracing the false religion of Islam, invading our culture. After a while of fighting and waging war, some of our people decided to move south. They saw some of our people getting caught up in that nonsense, and we saw the neighborhood deteriorating, and we decided to move south and reestablish our civilization. Very similar to some people living in certain neighborhoods in America. And you see crime and foolishness becoming occurring on a regular basis. When you see the neighborhood going down, you've done everything you wanted to do and felt you needed to do to try to uplift and restore order in the neighborhood, some people will migrate away, reestablish themselves in a different part of the city, different neighborhood, a different subdivision, whatever it is, and build a community based on what they recognize to be an orderly community, a social order that's rooted in the order of creation if they're focused, if they're intelligent. So when we see that deterioration, we began to move south. Some of our people were up in the north. They brought some of that infection with them. Once some of us had already moved south, reestablished civilization, some people fell out with the white Arabs, fell out with the brainwashed black Muslims. They wanted to rejoin some of the people in the south. Some just wanted to infiltrate. Some wanted to invade. Some wanted to stake out. They had different agendas. But some people, even the ones who didn't have a negative agenda, but they were still brainwashed and had some of that infection, they brought that infection with them and began to color the tradition with perversity. Influences from Islam, influences from Judaism, influences from Christianity. And that began to infect the practice of the culture over 1,000 years ago. We know about Timbuktu, 1,000 years ago in the great Western empires, they were already corrupted, of course, with Islam back then. So that's a 1,000-plus year corruption. And some of our people brought that ignorance of influence from Islam, monotheism, that kind of nonsense, into the new settlement. And it began to infect the culture, and especially when you had certain so-called spiritualists who were criminal type and manipulative, who would use spiritual ritual, negatively affect people, try to steal money from people or get women, or, put bad medicine on people to try to kill people, to take over the society and take over rulership and negatively affect the governmental structure, whatever it is, to ally with the whites and their offspring for economic reasons, all these various different things. People had different reasons for doing what they were doing. Small percentage, but it's still, when you have that small percentage of people, it's still a cancer that's beginning to fester, to metastasize. So when people began to engage in that process, some of those pseudo-spiritualists would incorporate this misinformation, weave it into the culture, and now after hundreds of years of practicing corruption, just like you have Muslims who've been Muslims for 1,000 years, Mohammedans, you have people who've been practicing traditional culture but have woven in various aspects of perversity over 1,000 years. And now you have so-called elders, so-called eldresses, so-called kings and queen mothers, Ohini and Ohini or Ahima on the continent, who appear to be representatives of the traditional culture. But they're representatives of the traditional culture. Woven into that practice is the corruption of white culture, and that's being passed off as authentic. This is why we talk about ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion, Afurakani, Afuraitkait ancestral religion, or Nanason is ancestral religion pure without the infection. And the infections began on the continent and then migrated over here. And then, of course, when the whites and their offspring began to force Christianity on our people over 150 years ago, then new corruptions began. And then, close to 100 years ago, you have Negroes embracing Islam and Moorishism and Hebrewism, all these fake traditions, pseudo-cultures, white cultures, and blackface. And then they began to produce a brand new form of the same infection. So that all happens over here, but it begins on the continent when some of our people embrace Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so forth, and wove it into the culture over the course of 1,000 years. So there are many people on the continent who appear to be traditional and have, all the accoutrements of tradition, but they're actually repositories for an infected culture. So the way you get back to a real culture is you go back to the individuals who founded the culture. And we have them in our blood circle, our direct blood circle. So we're not dependent upon anyone outside of our direct blood circle to learn our culture. We learn directly from our Nananom Nsamanfo, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who came into the world with us. And we learn from the Abosom who came into the world with us, who were assigned to us by Inyamewa Inyame. Nobody can legitimize your practice of culture except for your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors. Anybody who says different is fraudulent, no matter what title they have, whether they call themselves Nana, Ohini, Ohima, Ochiame, Okomfo, Abosomfo. That means nothing. Your ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, who are Nananon, who are assigned to you by the Supreme Being, the Abosom, who are assigned to you by the Supreme Being, Inyamewa, Inyame, pre-incarnation. These are the individuals and entities who legitimate your practice because they only guide you according to what is woven and written and encoded in your kra, your soul, your divine consciousness. So, this is what we deal with foundationally on ODWIRA, which is today. So, what we're going to get into, what does it mean to be Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit? What does it mean to be African, Black? Proper definition. And then we're going to get into not only what does it mean with regard to our identity, But then what does that have to do with, and how does that shape and inform a proper worldview? Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, so-called worldview, or really the view of the world as it really is. So it's not just our view of the world, it's the view of the world as it really is. There's a difference between somebody who can actually see and somebody whose sight is hindered because they have a disease of the eyes or if someone is blind. Their perception, somebody who has a disease of the eyes and can't see very well, their perception of the world is limited. So it's not like they have their own view of the world and it's just as valid as somebody else's view of the world. That's foolishness. They have a limited view of the world because they can't see, whereas the person whose eyesight is sound, they can see everything clearly. So their view of the world is a view that actually is, whereas somebody who has a limited view or corrupted view, it's based on disease. That's the difference between Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people and non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit, non-African, non-black people. The difference between us and white Europeans, white Asians, white Hindus, white Arabs, white pseudo-Native Americans who are just Asians, they have a truncated view of the world because they do not have the capacity to attune to the forces in nature, the abosome, that undergird the order in the world. And because they cannot connect with them, they cannot attune to the order in creation, so they can therefore cannot perceive all of creation harmoniously. They can't perceive it at all. They can see what's in front of them, and that's it. They can't perceive the inner workings of the forces that govern and shape events and manifest forms in creation and how things change and so forth. So we're going to get into that. So that's the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit worldview is the view of the world that's full and proper. Also called Afrocentric worldview, Africentric worldview, African-centered worldview, but we're going to give a proper definition, which has not been given before we gave the proper definition. The reason why, because first of all, you can't have an Afrocentric worldview if you do not know what the term Africa means. And because we've been following the misinformation of the whites and their offspring, we haven't had the capacity to properly define our identity. You have some Negroes who don't want to use the term Africa at all. They don't want to use the term black because they're brainwashed with white foolishness. But even individuals who want to embrace the term, they look at these false definitions given by the white offspring. For example, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's essay on the origin of the term Africa, UNESCO, where you have scholars from around the world all coming together to write on various aspects of culture. They put together a multi-volume set dealing with the history of Africa, and one of the things they focused on in the beginning is the origin of the term. And they put forward about 7 possible etymologies and what they mean and why they think this may have been a meaning of the term Africa, where it comes from, and so forth. And we show in our book, Afuraka, Afuraitkait, the origin of the term Africa, why their etymologies and their definitions with regard to those etymologies, all of them are inaccurate. We also show where those 7 terms come from. They are not different terms from various cultures from around the world, like a term from Sanskrit, apara, meaning they who come after, and Preka from the Latin meaning the sunny land, or Afrik, the Greek meaning the land that's not cold, and Afrika or Ifrika meaning the queen of heaven in Arabic, and Farika meaning the land of fruit in quote-unquote Phoenician. And all these different terms, none of these are not different terms from different languages. All of those terms can be found in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphics of ancient Kemet. We proved that by producing those hieroglyphics, showing they have the exact same meaning. So all those terms actually come from Kemet. They were learned by these other perverse cultures and carried into their languages, but all those terms, all of them exist in the Medutu with those same meanings. However, none of them are the origin of the term. So book is dedicated to the origin of the term, and we go into detail about that, and we prove that, including the misinformation. For example, if someone was watching Hidden Colors, and they start talking about our identity as a people, and from the gate, the first thing you learn in Hidden Colors is that they say Africa, the term Africa comes from a Roman general, Scipio Africanus, which is 100% false. So from the gate, they're telling you you're not African, misinforming people from the gate. And the people just, the majority of those individuals are just ignorant of the facts because they embraced what the whites and their offspring had put forward. They read that information. They didn't take the time to investigate beyond what the whites and their offspring put forward, and therefore since it was a consensus in the white pseudo-scholarly community, they didn't find anything else. They just moved forward with it. Of course, some of those individuals, you have some of the individuals who are manipulative, criminal types working with the whites and their offspring, trying to misinform our people. But the majority of those individuals, they just didn't have the facts. But at the end of the day, from the gate, you get misinformed. And then that kind of information gets replicated all throughout the internet, people downloading information on their iPhones and tablets and laptops, of course, desktops and everything, and misinforming another generation of people. So we put this information out to correct the record. Of course, Scipio Africanus did not name the continent. His last name was Scipio. He didn't take on Africanus until he conquered the northern part of the continent, knew the name was already Afuraka, and he took on that name, Romanized it, Latinized it, Africanus, and moved forward. Just like his brother Lucius Cornelius Scipio invaded Asia, and after winning a war in Asia, he took on the name Scipio Asiaticus. So one brother invades Asia, he becomes Scipio Asiaticus. One brother invades Afuraka, Afuraitkait, he becomes Scipio Africanus after he invades, not because he came up with the name of the continent. So, but we go into detail about that in the book, and the true historical origin and breaking down those various different pseudo-etymologies. What we want to focus on today is specifically just the meaning of the term, what it actually is, as it relates to our identity. Once we get the identity down, then we're going to show that rooted in that identity what the worldview is and how it's directly rooted in our identity and how we are separate from all other people in the world. So if you look at first, we put a link. What does it mean to be Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit? We put that link in the chat room near the top. And as you look through, you'll see the various terms, and we're not going to read the whole text. We just want you to see that information, and we want you to see at the top where we talk about a Kadine, the term being our collective Kadine, our collective soul name. So in the Akan tradition, there's such concept as the Kadine, and every group has a similar concept. They just have different names and different ways of going about expressing that. The term Din or Edin means name in the Akan language, the tree language. Din also means name in the language of ancient Kemet, because it's the same language, of course. Ka or Ka means soul, divine consciousness. It's the deity that dwells in the head region that's assigned to you by Nyamewa. Nyame, the great mother, the great father. Nyamewa is Amenet. Nyame is Amen, the great father and the great mother from ancient Kemet, the same male and female divinity that we still deal with. They assign a divinity to dwell with our spirit, within our spirit throughout our lives, to guide us, and we communicate with that divinity. It dwells in the head region and pulls us in our head region towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. So that's what the Kra is, that force, your personal divinity. And then there's a name associated with the Kra. So when a Akan person is born, based on the day of the week that we're born on, we receive a Kadine that's associated with that day. The 7 days of the week are governed by the sun, moon, and planets based on the different days. Akwesida or Awusida, Sunday is governed by the sun. Joada is governed by the moon, which is Monday. Benada or Abenada is governed by the planet Bena, which is so-called Mars. We say Bena. Wednesday is Awukuda or Akwada, governed by the planet Awuku, which is they call Mercury. We call that planet Awuku, that Ochin Nsoroma, which is the term for planets in Akan. We call it Awuku. Yalda or Abada or Yada, which is Thursday, governed by the planet Yao, which is Jupiter, which they call Jupiter, but also Ya and Abba, Uranus and Neptune. And then Fida, which is for Friday, the planet Afi, which we call Afi, of course they call it Venus, and Meminida is governed by the planet Amini, which is what they call Saturn. And we have the Akradine Boson page where we talk about these sun, moon, and various planets, and the boson that animate these solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. And they govern all natural cycles. And this 7-day cycle is a natural cycle. So when we talk about Awusi Da, you're talking about Awusi, the abosom Awusi, who is Asar in ancient Kemet, Awusi, which we say Awusi, or Awisi, or Asi, different titles of this divinity. Ajua, Monday, governing the moon, Osorane. Ajua is Aset. But then also on the male side is Ajo. When Aset and Asar are operating through the moon, they're called Ajua and Ajo. Aset and Asar. When they're in connection with Ra and Ra'et, they're called Asar Ra and Aset Ra'et. And they operate through the sun. So it's Asar, Awusi, and Etsi on Sunday. Ajua and Ajo on Monday. Benada Tuesday is Kwabena, Abena. Bena and Abena is Heru Behudet and Setchima Sekmet. Wednesday, Awukuda, the planet Awuku, so-called Mercury, is governed by Awuku or Kweku Anansi, the messenger, the trickster, and so forth. And then Akua, who is Nebuchadnezzar in ancient Kemet. Awuku or Kweku Anansi is Set, also called Eshu in the Yoruba tradition, Set in ancient Kemet. So that's Set and Nebuchadnezzar. Yao, Ya, and Abba is Heru, Wachet, and Nekabeth. They govern Yauda and Yada and Abada, which is Thursday. Then you have Fida, planet Afi. On the female side, it's Het Heru, which is Afi or Afua. And then on the male side, Fi, which is a title of Amen Men, the divinity Amen Men in ancient Kemet. And then on Saturday, those male and female divinities, when they're in connection with Amen, you have Men and Het Heru. She's called Men Menit when she's in connection with Amenet, and she's called Het Heru outside of that connection with Amenet. But she has the title Men Menit when she's in connection with Amenet. Just like the deity Men, they often spell it M-I-N. It's really M-E-N. He's called Men. One of his titles is Fi or Fai. This is why in our Khan culture, Men is also called Fi or Fi. And he's the male divinity operating through the planet Afi. So it's Afi and Fi, which is Het Heru and Men. But when they're in connection with Amen and Amenet, Men is called Amen Men, or Men in harmony with Amen. And Het Heru is called Men Meni. And they operate through the planet Amini, which is Saturn. So when we're born on those days, that is an indication that we were assigned to those abosom pre-incarnation, meaning that you're an ancestral spirit. You're one of the Nananon Nsamanfo, Asamanfo Pa. You're living in the spirit realm, Asamando. And before you incarnate into a womb and you're sent back into the womb and be born through one of your descendants, you're assigned a cross, soul, a divine consciousness, a divinity. That particular divinity, if you were assigned to deity Benna, if you're a male, who is Heru Behudet in ancient Kemet, Heru Bedat, or Heru Benna. He's called Benna in our Khan culture, the abosom of the planet Benna, Mars, abosom of war, iron, hot metal, enforcer of divine order, and so forth. He's called Ogun in the Yoruba tradition, Ogu in Vodun, Ikenga in the Igbo tradition. He's a metal caster and so forth, and this is why in Akan, the term gu means metal caster, one who casts metal, and the Ogufo are those group of people, fo, who engage the gu process or cast metal. So Bena, the abosom of hot metal, is also Ogufo. So it's still the same divinity. If you are assigned to that force in nature, pre-incarnation, if that's the divinity you are assigned to and your soul is infused with his energy, then you're going to be born on Benada. The ancestresses and the abosom will make sure that you come out of the womb on Benada as an indication that you were assigned to the abosom Bena pre-incarnation. So when somebody's born on a Benada or Tuesday, and they come out of the womb, we know if that's a male, his Kadine or his soul's name is Kwa Bena, or a servant or subject of Bena. That's the name of the divinity that dwells in his head region. And then he's also given a name for his own Sunsum, his own spirit. So, for example, I was born on Akwesida or Awusida, which is Sunday, and therefore my soul's name is Kwesi. That's my soul's name, the deity that dwells in my head region. His name is Kwesi. He's a child of the great Awusi, the divinity Awusi or Asar. He has that same kind of energy, and he dwells with me, and I attune to that divinity when we engage in akragwade or soul washing and so forth to align our spirits with our souls and purify ourselves, especially on our krada on a weekly basis and on a yearly basis as well. That's the divinity that guides me, governs me. So my soul's name, his name is Kwesi. When I communicate with that divinity in my head region, I would say Mikra Kwesi, Mipawo Cha, Kerimi no Kware. That means me, my soul, Kwesi, Mipawo Cha, please, or I beg your pardon, please. Kerimi no Kware, show me, no Kware, show me the truth. Show me what is real, what is true, what is accurate. Communicating with this divinity. It is the same in the Yoruba tradition when people communicate with their Ori Inu, that is a divinity. In the Vodun tradition, when somebody communicates with their Se Lido, the divinity that dwells in the head region, it's a separate divinity that's assigned to you. And since it's assigned to you, you can call it your soul, or your cry, your Se, your Ori Inu. So my soul's name is Kwesi. My name connected to my Sunsum, my spirit, is Ra Nehem Pata Akan. And of course, title is Ojirapo, dealing with my function. But my name is Ra Nehem Pata Akan. My soul's name is Kwesi, because the soul dwells within my spirit. People can call me Kwesi as well. So that's that process. If it's a female born on Fida, Friday, after the Abosom Afi, the female Abosom Afi, with Het Heru, called Oshun in the Yoruba tradition, Azili in Vodun. The female would be called Afua or Afia, and so forth. So she would be named after that divinity. Her soul's name is Afi or Afia or Afua, Efua, Defanti, typically. So her soul's name is that, and then she would have another name as well. That is an indication or evidence that her spirit, her Sunsum, was assigned, Afi, that divinity was assigned to her Krawa, her soul, her divine consciousness, pre-incarnation, and therefore they made sure that she came out on her day. The day that planet's energy is dominating and penetrating the Earth's atmosphere at the first hour of sunrise and coloring the energy of the Earth. So when the baby takes his first breath, that energy of Afi is what is infused within the child. So that's what the Kadine process is, and we're going to get into more detail about that as we have our series on the Akradine bosom, the abosom of the Akradine, the soul name. But just like we have that, and it's talking about the soul, and your soul, encoded within your soul is your divine function that you are to execute in the world. It's like every organ in your body has a specific function to execute. It was designed, has a specific form, and a specific function to execute in your body. Your lungs have their own form tied to their specific function. Your heart has its own form, has a specific function. Your liver has a specific form that's related to a specific function. We as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we have a divine function. There's a male and female aspect of that divine function. The male aspect is Nkra, the female aspect is Nkrabia, and this is one of the, for example, this is one of the things that people have lost knowledge of, even on the continent, not understanding there's a male and female aspect of this divine function. They understand Nkrabia, but they didn't understand Nkra. They understand Shebia to a certain extent, but often get that wrong, but don't understand the male aspect, which is the Ashe. So we have a book, the Okra Complex, the Soul of Akanfo, where we detail the nature of the soul, the Okrawa, and show the Nkra, Nkrabia, She, and Shebia, the fourfold function of the soul, what your function is and the kind of energy you've been given to execute your function in the world. So the Supreme Being, just like the organs in your body have a form and a function, Supreme Being gives you a function to execute in the world. You're a spirit sent into the world to execute a function within the great divine body, which is the Supreme Being. And we're cells within that great divine body. And your soul carries that function, and you can feel that pull in your head towards certain kinds of behaviors and away from other kinds of behaviors, because it's encoded within your head what you need to be engaged in and what you don't need to be engaged in based on who you are, what your function is. The Kadine, or the soul name, every time you hear that name, every time you speak that name, that collection of vibrations stimulates your soul, your krawa, and stimulates your sum, your spirit, to realign itself with the function you came into the world with. That's the power of the name. Sound vibrations move matter, and they affect your spirit in a way that if they're properly structured, they will make your spirit realign with the divine function that was given to execute in the world. And since you hear your name more than any other phrase throughout your life, every time you hear a name, it should be a properly structured configuration of sound vibrations that will make your sum automatically realign with the divine function Nyamewa and Nyame gave you to execute in the world. That is the soul name. And that's what names do in general, but specifically we're talking about the soul name. That's what properly given names do in general, properly recognized names do in general. When we're talking about the Kadine in this particular piece. So when we talk about, and that's just on an individual level, the term Afuraka, Afuraitkait is actually our collective soul name, our collective Kadine, or Kadine, as it would be said in ancient Kemet, our collective soul name. So let's define that, and then we'll see how it's our collective soul name so we can see how it aligns us with our functioning creation as a collective. And recall, just like you have organs that regulate order in your body, and then the organs have children, which are the cells, and the cells support the organs. And when they support the organs, they support the whole body. Liver cells supporting the liver, and when they do that, they support the whole body. Heart cells support the heart functions, and when they do that, they support the whole body. We are cells within the great divine body of Nyamewa Nyame. The abosome are the organs, the smaller bodies within the great body that regulate order in the body, and we are the cells of those organs. It's Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, as well as plant life, animal life, and mineral life. The whites and offspring are cancerous cells within the body, and they have no connection to the divine. So, we're a collective. And as a collective, we have a collective Kadine. You have your individual Kadine, your individual soul name that's based on your individual function and what you are to execute in the world, and your names connected to your patriclan and matriclan that further define your function in the world. So you have a Kadine, a soul name, like Kwapena or Kwesi or Afua. Then you have, based on your patrilineal clan or patricircular clan, or your matrilineal clan, matricircular clan, your Abusia, and connected to the Abusia boson, the Abusia, the deity of your matriclan, and the Eja boson, the deity of your patriclan. Then you have names associated with those two that further defines your energy, and then based on your experience and so forth, and your character, your personality, your energy, you have names that further define that, so it's further nuance to give you something that's specifically unique that actually emanates from you, and we talked about that yesterday. So, but the collective Afuraka, Afuraitkait. The term Af means flesh in the language of the ancient Kemet. Plural is Afu. So Af means flesh. But Af and Afik also means a house or a chamber or a place of residence. Why does Af or Afik or Afu mean flesh, but it also means a house or a place of residence? Because, of course, your flesh, as we talked about yesterday, is the place of residence for your sum, for your spirit. So your flesh is a house. Your Af, your flesh, is an Afik, a house or place of residence, a chamber. The flesh itself is called Enam. That's a descriptive title in the language of Kemet. Is called Enam, spelled in the Medusa, the hieroglyphics Enam. In the language of in Akan culture, in the tree language, the term for flesh or skin is Enam, and we talked about that yesterday. So, but also, just like Af means flesh, Afu meaning flesh, and then you have Af, Afik, Afat meaning house, place of residence. In the Akan language, Ofie means home, place of residence. You also have Afun, which means a carcass or flesh. So these are the same terms phonetically, but the same terms conceptually in the tree language, of course, of the Akan people in ancient Kemet as well, because it's the same language, of course, that we continue to speak. Ra is the creator of the world. Ra'et is the creatress of the world. Ra has a title in ancient Kemet, Ra Aku, and Ra Aku became Ra-Ku, or Anaku, Ananku, Nyanku, and then Pong means great. It also means circular. So Nanku Pong or Nyanku Pong is the great circular Pong, Nyanku, or serpent. That's a descriptive title of Ra, the creator. When you see Ra in ancient Kemet, he's a serpent swallowing its tail, or a circular serpent around the disk of the sun. And the same with Ra'et. When you write the name of Ra'et, write a circular serpent around the disk of the sun, also with the Medusa for the letter T, the T sound. So you have Ra, the circular serpent around the sun, Ra'et, the circular serpent around the sun. This is why Ra-Ku becomes Ra-Ku, Adanku, or Adanku, Nanku, Nankupon. That's what the term Nanka in general means serpent. Puff adder specifically in Akan culture. Pong means great, but it also means circular. So it's a great circular serpent. Nyonkumpong, as we say in the Akan language, in Ghana, whether it's east, west, and so forth. When you start getting further west and into Ivory Coast, Nyonkumpong becomes Anangaman, or Edanga, Odanga, Odangaman. So they pronounce it slightly different, but it's still dealing with Danku, Raku, Nanku, Nyanku, Nyonkumpong, the great circular serpent, the creator of the world. Nyonkunton means rainbow, but it's also talking about the female serpent, the rainbow serpent in ancient Kemet, in Akan culture, in Yoruba, in Vodun, across the board in Afuraka, Afuraitkait. The rainbow serpent is the creator and creatress in the world. The circular serpent that swallows its tail is the creator and the creatress. They're often the rainbow serpent dealing with the sun, the solar energy, and they are the creator and creatress of the world. That's in Nyonkumpong and in Nyonkunton. In our Akan culture, that's Ra and Ra'et, or Ra-Kun and Ra-Kait in ancient Kemet. That's Da and Idohuedo, the creator and creatress in Vodun, the circular serpents that swallow their tails, are the creator and creatress of the world. You have Odumare and Oshumare in the Yoruba tradition, these circular serpents that are rainbow serpents that is creator and creatress of the world. So we have a book, Nyonkumpong, Nyonkunton, Ra and Ra'et, where we prove all that in detail. So Ra and Ra'et are the creator and creatress of the world. So this is where you get the title Afu Ra. When Ra moves through, for example, you see Ra in the boat of the sun sailing across the sky. He's in the form of a hawk, a bird, or just a hawk-headed man, the body of a man, the head of a hawk, sitting in the boat of the Aten of the sun, sailing across the sky. he utilizes the sun to transmit his energy. Ra and Ra create the sun and the other stars. They utilize them as transmitters of energy. So when you see Ra sitting in the boat of the Aten, he is not the sun god. He uses the Aten of the sun to transmit his energy. He's Ra sailing through the sky. When the boat of the sun sets in the west and then goes into the underworld, into the 12 hours of the night, then you see Ra sitting in the boat. He has taken on the form of a ram-headed divinity, a land animal, the flat-horned ram. So he has the body of a man, the head of a ram, and he's in the boat sailing in the underworld for the 12 hours of the night. And then once he gets to the 12th hour, then he's in the east again. He gets into the boat of sunrise, and then the boat sails up into the sky. He discards the flesh of the ram and returns to the aerial animal, the hawk form, and sails across the sky as Ra. When he's moving in the underworld, in the form of a flat-horned ram, he is called Afura, meaning Ra moving through flesh or matter. Remember, Af means flesh. It also means house or place of residence. The earth itself becomes the flesh, the matter, the house or place of residence of the great divine living energy, the great spirit. So Ra takes on the term name Afura, Ra moving through the Afu, moving through the flesh, moving through the flesh of the flat-horned ram, and moving through the earth itself. It's like solar energy sailing across the sky, but then when it penetrates the earth and gets inside of the earth, that fiery light energy is heating up the earth. There's fire inside the earth. It's like fire inside of coal. When you see a coal burning, at first, before it starts getting orange or whatever, there's fire and it's smoldering. It's inside that blackness. There's fire inside. It's in the flesh. It's Afu. Afu fire. Fire inside the Afu, inside the container. So it's called Afura. The same with Ra'et. She's called Afuraitkait. This is why the Berbers call her Afri or Ifri or Ifru and so forth. And they call her a sun goddess and a cave goddess because when she sails through the sky, she's Ra'et. When she moves through the underworld, she's Afuraitkait or Afuraitkait or Afri or Ifri. Different pronunciations for that. So when they're moving through matter, they're Afura, Afuraitkait. Now, when the earth was first forming, that first black sphere and Ra and Ra'et's energy first penetrated the brand new earth and enlivened it and lit it up and caused the separation of the atmosphere from the denser portions, from the fluid portions, which would be the ocean, and then the ocean floor. Then their divine living energy fire penetrated through this black sphere into the ocean floor and caused rumblings on the ocean floor, earthquakes on the ocean floor. And those earthquakes or volcanoes on the ocean floor eventually caused the surging upward of a portion of the ocean floor to break through the surface of the water, and that was the first hill or highland in the creation of the world. That became the first landmass that broke through the surface of the water. The term for high land in ancient Kemet is Ka or Kaka, a highland, a raised land, an exhausted land, a hill or a mountain. Ka sometimes doubled as Kaka. In the Akan language, the term for a hill or highland is Koko. So we're dealing with the same term, of course. When Afura and Afuraitkait first moved through that first landmass, that first highland, that land became the Ka, or the land of Afura, Afuraka, the land of the Creator, and the land Ka'et, the feminine aspect of it, of Afuraitkait, the land of the Creatress. So Afuraka, Afuraitkait is the land of the Creator, land of the Creatress. That is the cosmology that undergirds the terms, which until we published that information, people didn't have the detail. Now, and we show specifically, the key is, in part 4 of the book, we show, and on the front cover, we show in the Chefs of Ani, the Papyrus of Ani, Afurakai in the Medutu, talking about Ra creating the first landmass of earth. We also show Afuraka in the temple of Aset in Paraka or Bale, spelling out in the Medutu the term Afuraka, which is talking about the highland, the first landmass of earth, proving that it's talking about this cosmology. And the term comes from our people, and it's actually in the text, which many people thought was not in the text until we published that information and released it. And now people are beginning to understand and investigate and realize that this has been an ancient term all along. So when you talk about the Ka and the Kayet, the first landmass that rose up, when Afura their energy began to move through that first landmass, first it rises up above the surface of the water, then their divine living energy, they infuse it into that landmass to make it fertile, to make it vibrant, so that crops can grow, and eventually we are born, our physical bodies are shaped from that, shaped by Ptah and Kunwimu and so forth. But that's the first landmass, and when Ra and Ra'et move through that landmass, through the Ka, they become Afura, Afuraitkait, moving through the Ka. The black, primordial black earth, the black substance, is a portion of the black substance of space. The black substance of space is an entity. It is a plasma. We've always understood that. We call it Ka and Kayet, a male and female divinity. In ancient Kemet and Kanat, it's called Kra and Krawa, or Kra and Akan, a male and female divinity. A portion of that black substance, which the white and offspring now call dark energy or dark matter, carved out to create the first star. In physics, of course, stars are considered black bodies. And then the life force energy penetrates these black bodies and illuminates them. They begin to shine and so forth, and they become stars. And then, of course, from the stars, the planets are formed. And then when the planets cool down and so forth, they eventually, form into planetary bodies and so forth. So that from the black substance of these black spheres, one of those black spheres became our earth, our earth mother. That black substance, a portion of that black substance, which makes up the black substance that makes up the earth, a portion of that is part of where our bodies come from. So the black substance in your body, we call abatum, melanin, that chemical that gives you your color. That black substance in your body comes directly from the black substance of earth, which comes directly from the black substance of space, the divinity Ka and Kayet, which is the divine soul, divine consciousness. Ka and Kayet is the great soul or consciousness that permeates all of creation. It is that which can take any form. It is the consciousness of the Supreme Being. And that our Ka and Kayet is a little sphere, a little portion, a little raindrop from that great Ka and Kayet, infused with life. So the Ka is the consciousness, the divine consciousness. Kayet, female, divine consciousness. You have a Ka and Kayet dwelling within your head. If you're a male, you have a Ka dwelling within your head region. It's called Kra and Akan, Ka in ancient Kemet, and Kayet, Ori, Inu, and Yoruba, and so forth. So that's your divine consciousness. Ra and Ra'et are the creator and creatress, the divine living energy that illuminates and enlivens all created entities. So that's the divine spirit. So you have the divine spirit that enlivens and animates all created entities. That is Ra and Ra'et. They are the great divine living energy. There's the great spirit, which in ancient Kemet would be called Ba and Ba'et, the great divine living energy spirit. In Akan, Ba is called Bra or Abra, meaning life or existence. So Ra is the great spirit, Ra'et is the great spirit female. That's your divine living energy. Afu is the flesh. Ka is the soul, the divine consciousness. So you have flesh, Afu, spirit, Ra, Ka, soul, divine consciousness. Flesh, Afu, spirit, Ra'et, soul, Kayet, divine consciousness. This is what defines us. This is our collective Kadine or soul name. Our collective soul name is Afuraka, Afuraitkait. We are the flesh, Afu, and have the spirit and soul of Ra and Ra'et and the Ka and Kayet. Our little soul of divine consciousness in our head region comes from the great soul, the great Ka and Kayet, the great black substance of space that's animated by the male and female forces, Ka and Kayet. One of their children separates from them and is planted in our head region, and that's a divinity, that little spirit guides us throughout our lives. That is our Ka and Kaya. We have a divine consciousness that's in attunement with the divine consciousness and divine intelligence of the Supreme Being. That's why that force in your head can always pull you in the right direction, whether you want to align with it or not. It can tell you what's going to happen before it happens and warn you of certain things and keep you away from certain things, even if it's just driving down the street and you have that strong pull in your head not to turn down the corner you normally turn down when you're going home or going to work, and you find out later that there was a car crash or something negative happened on that street, and you'll say, something told me not to go down that street. Very often that's your Ka that has foreknowledge of the shaping factors of things that are taking place or about to take place and guides you properly. Sometimes it's your Unsamanfo or the Abosom, but they're only telling you what your Kra has been trying to tell you. So it's still coming from the Kra ultimately. So that divine intelligence, that force of divine consciousness dwelling in your head region, that's your Ka, your Kaya. So that's the soul portion, the divine living energy animating your being that you direct throughout your body. It also allows you to attune to the divine living energy animating plant life, animal life, mineral life, as well as the planet, sun, moon, and stars, and so forth. The spirit that animates the earth, animates the planets, animates the oceans, animates the sun, animates the black substance of space. These are the Abosom. They have divine living energy in them. You can connect your divine living energy, your Ra force, the Ra'et force, your Ba and Ba'et to theirs, and therefore you can communicate with them and be guided by them, get possessed by them ritually, and so forth, be fed and replenished by them. Your energy can be replenished by theirs. Just like sunlight can replenish you, water from the ocean, the rivers can replenish you. The energy of the spirit that animates the sun replenishes your spiritual energy, your fiery energy. The spirit that animates the rivers and oceans, those are Bosom, they can replenish the cool magnetic energy within you as well. Because you have a Ba, you can link your energy to theirs, and that bridge of energy makes a connection, and they can travel across that bridge for spirit possession and communication. If you don't have a Ba, if you don't have a divine living energy surging throughout your body and your being at all times, throughout your spirit, then you just have lower level electromagnetic energy like you will find in a magnet or in a battery and so forth that can animate you. Just like you can plug a battery into a little car or robot and they can make it move around, but it's not connected to a divine living force in nature, making conscious decisions. It's just electromagnetic energy. That's what the whites and their offspring have. They don't have a connection, a divine connection to the divinity. So you have that divine living energy coming from Ra and Ra'et. You have flesh, Afu, and then you have consciousness, Ka. That's what defines us. We are the living Ra, soul, Ka, in the flesh, Afu. We're directly descendants of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. This is why they talk about Ra crying or the tears coming from the eye of Ra, which is the sun, and those teardrops become men and women. Those teardrops, the divine living energy coming from the sun that becomes the spirit of men and women. The term Ani means I in ancient Kemet. The term Eni means I in the Akan tradition. This is why an individual is called Ni or Ni. And also Unipa. Unipa is a person that's related to the eye. It's related to, of course, Ra crying or dropping teardrops from the sun, and that becomes the fiery energy that makes up our spirit. So this is our identity. We are children of Ra and Ra'et, children of the creator and creatress. We are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. That's who we are. That's our identity. That's our collective Kadine, our soul name. The black substance of space makes up the blackness in our bodies, the black chemical, and therefore we are black or dark brown with black undertones, or dark brown with red undertones, and so forth, because we have that chemical directly from the Ka and Kaida, the black substance of space. Those two divinities is inside of us, and then the divine living fire energy is circulating through that black substance, and that is our Ba and Ba'et, the force of Ra and Ra'et, and it's all encased in Afu, flesh. And our flesh, of course, is permeated by that black substance as well, and therefore we have color because that's natural. And all natural entities have color. The only time you have something that does not have color is when it's unnatural, melanin recessive like the whites in their offspring. So this is our collective identity. So now that we have an understanding of our identity and we're direct children of Ra and Ra'et, and our souls come directly from Ka and Ka'et, and our flesh is permeated by that divine energy of that black substance, and therefore that magnetism allows us to draw in the energy and hold the energy of Ka and Ka'et and Ra and Ra'et and so forth, because we have that within our physical being. Now let's look at, we're going to look at the worldview. And we're going to go to the Maranechi, divine law and divine hate. And we're going to put that link in real quick. And of course, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can communicate in the chat room or hit the number 1 on the phone line so we can see your hand is raised. All right, I just want to make sure. Okay, so there's one quick question. If I was born on Yauda, which is Thursday, would I be a part of the Ayoko clan or Ayoko Abusia? Now, the days of the week do not determine what matriclan or matrilineal or matricircular clan you come from. That's dependent on, the female that you were born through. So the days of the week are specifically dealing with the divinity that governs specifically your crop, your soul, your crowd, your divine consciousness. That's what the days of the week determine. Then you find out your abusia or your clan specifically through, you find out through your unsamampo, your nananom unsamampo, your ancestresses and ancestors. If you don't have people in the community who are part of the culture, like most of us raised in the diaspora, the so-called diaspora, or in the West, separated from direct blood relatives on the continent, then you find out directly from your blood relatives like you normally would do. Normally we find out most information about the culture from our Nananom Mpanyimfo, which are our spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses, and then also from our Nananom Nsamamfo, which is our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. We find out from both. But because we typically don't have Nananom Mpanyimfo in the community, because the elders and eldresses are very often in church and don't understand the culture, then we have to get most of our information from our other elders and eldresses who have already made their transition, who are in the ancestral realm. But there's nothing wrong with that, because you have Nsamamfo who are assigned to you by Inyame wa Inyame anyway to assist you in your development. We just have to lean on them more because of our condition here. But that's good and better in a sense, because therefore we get the tradition uncut and not infected, as opposed to very often people will go and find the older person from the continent to learn something about the culture, and very often, typically, they've been infected to some degree by Islam and Christianity or something, and they're weaving that misinformation into the practice of the culture. So you'll find people, for example, talking about the Akan people are monotheistic, and the Yoruba people are monotheistic, and the Igbo people are monotheistic, and Bodun is monotheistic. That's pure idiocy. That's nonsense. That's coming from brainwashed Negroes on the continent who have embraced that infection and continue to perpetuate it. And some of them are priests, priestesses, kings, queen mothers, so-called elders and eldresses, PhDs, writing books and dissertations and doing presentations and so forth, and continuously miseducating people on every level because they have embraced that infection. Some of them is unconscious because they really believe what they're doing, and they can look back 5, 6 generations and their people have been teaching the same thing. But if you go back 10 generations, over 200 years ago, the whites and offspring had already infiltrated. If you go back 40 generations, that's 800 years. You're just going right back to the time of Timbuktu when Islam was already corrupting the culture. So it doesn't matter if somebody says, well, we have intergenerationally, we have priests and priestesses going back generations. Go back 40 generations, 50 generations, you'll get hit with the Muslim invasions of ancient the Ghana Empire So that lineage means nothing if you're telling false information. So don't let anybody tell you anything about a lineage. That means nothing. Don't let anybody tell you anything about elders and eldresses. That means nothing to us. The only elders and eldresses that we should be focused on are our own direct blood relatives in our blood circle. And they will inform us what our abusia is, what our clan is, and so forth. All right, so let's get into the worldview. We have a better idea now of when you hear the term Africa now, and when you can read the book and it goes into, of course, much more detail. We just wanted to touch on the most important things, Afuraitkait, Afuraitkait. So you understand flesh, divine living energy of the Creator and Creatress, Ra and Ra'et, and the soul, the divine consciousness dwelling in your head region, Ka and Ka'et. So you understand you have that flesh, that spirit, and that soul that's divine that connects you directly with the Creator and Creatress, who are functionaries, by the way, of Amen, Amenet, the Supreme Being. So you have Amen and Amenet, the Supreme Being, Ra and Ra'et are the Creator and Creatress, actually the grandchildren of the Supreme Being. In our Khan culture, that's Inyamewa and Inyame, it's Amenet and Amen, the Supreme Being. Nyonkumpon and Nyonkunton are Ra and Ra'et, the grandchildren of the Supreme Being, who are the Creator and Creatress, who function on behalf of the Supreme Being. Just like Da and Ida Huedo in Vodun are the Creator and Creatress, but they are functionaries of Mawu and Lisa. There's a difference between the Creator and Creatress and the Supreme Being. Brainwashed Negroes who are embracing monotheism because they've been infected with Islam or Christianity or Judaism and so forth, they don't understand that. And we have books and articles on various divinities. We talk about Nyamewa and Nyame in one of our articles. We have a book dealing with Odomakuma, with Pidriampong, with Nyonkumpon, Nyonkunton, various divinities, because we show these are actually different deities, not just names of the Supreme Being. Only the brainwashed believe that Tridriampong or Odomakuma or Oboadie are just different names and titles of the Supreme Being. That's totally inaccurate. So we go into detail about that. So we just want to touch on the identity of the collective soul man. So now that we know who we are, what is the view, the world view of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people? What is the proper world view? Go to Maat and Falsehood, Divine Law and Divine Hate. You can go to page 48. As we said earlier, our proper view of the world is the view of the world as it actually is. Because we don't have a truncated view. We have the flesh of the Creator and Creatress. We have Afuraitkait, and we have the soul, the divine consciousness, the Ka and Ka'et of the Supreme Being. We have a portion of their divine consciousness so we can see. We can attune to what's real. We can know and connect. Our drop, that little black sphere that's dwelling within our head region, is a child of the great blackness of space that permeates all things. All suns, moons, planets, stars, everything exists within that black substance. It permeates all things and it knows all things. And our little black sphere of energy, our little Ka, our little Ka'et, that little divinity, is a child of that great Ka and Ka'et, and it can link with them to gain knowledge of all things in creation. That's why it can lead us properly. So therefore, we have the consciousness embedded within us of the Supreme Being, woven into our Ka, our Kra, our Krawa. We have the energy, the divine living energy that permeates all things, that animates all created things with a capital C, divinely created things, moving through our system. And then our flesh is sacred because it houses the divine spirit, the Ba of Ra, the Ba'et of Ra'et, and the divine soul, the Ka and the Ka'et. So we have that. So we have the capacity, therefore, to see the world, to see Abadie, the created universe, as it really is. The whites and offspring do not have a Ka or Ka'et. If you engage in disorder, that deity that dwells in your head region, you will repel that divinity. You will say, Nekra Driane, his Kra has fled from him, it will separate from your spirit body. Just like a bird flying away from a perch, your Kra will flee from you. And if you don't do something ritually to coax it back, and it will separate and go back to Inyamewa, Inyame, and never return, and now you're a spirit without a soul. You're a Sum without an Akra. or no krawa. You're in the Yoruba tradition, you're somebody without an ori inu. It's separated from you. Or in Vodun, they'll say the se lido, the se has separated from the person. They have become nothing more than a walking corpse. So we want to make sure we don't repel our crowd. And the only thing that's repulsive to the crowd is engaging in disorder. Deliberately engaging in disorder, consistently rejecting and neglecting the direction of the crowd, it will separate from you. You reverse your polarity, as we always say. Now you become like the two magnets on the table where the same polarities are facing. They become repulsive to one another, and they cannot come together until the polarities reverse, and until the opposites are facing. Well, as long as the like poles are facing, they become repulsive. And you engage in disorder, you reverse your polarity, you become repulsive to your crowd, it will separate from you. And if that happens and it remains in that condition, if it leaves and returns to Inyame wa Inyame, it will dissolve back into the great black substance, and it's gone forever, just like a drop of water returning to the ocean and dissolving. And now you're a spirit without a crowd. Now you become a disordered spirit, a criminal-type spirit, a lustful, malicious-type spirit. This is the nature of the whites and their offspring. They were engaged in that kind of perversity thousands of years ago. Their crowd separates from them. When that black sphere of energy separates and they are forced out of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, away from the population, and they migrate and are drawn into northern Eurasia, then they also, that black Ka-ed within their bodies, that melanin also leaves them as well. They become physically deficient, just like they're spiritually deficient. They're a spirit without a soul, and they continue to reincarnate that way because their souls that they previously had dissolved into that blackness, and they continue to reincarnate that way, and their physical bodies are physical bodies without that physical Ka-ed, without that melanin content, and now they're bleached out, melanin deficient, melanin recessive criminal entity. And of course, they manifest disorder consistently because they incarnate as spirits of disorder. They're the cancerous cells within the body of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, humanity. And cancerous cells are isolated and destroyed by the immune system. They are not reintegrated into the system. They are destroyed, and that's the divine response. So they don't have the Ka, so therefore they don't have the capacity to see. They don't have a force in their head region that can link up with the great black substance of space that encompasses all things and can attune to everything and every cell and every entity in creation and relay that information to the little black sphere of energy within the head of the person. They don't have that. So they can't see. They don't have a view of the world that's full. They have a truncated view of the world based on their discordant and distorted spirit, the disfigured spirit. That's all they have. Now, like a blind person or somebody who's legally blind, they can't see everything in the room. They can only see certain things, and certain things may look like a book or a chair, and it turns out to be a dog. Or something looks like something else, and it turns out to be something else. So they can't see. They don't have that perception. So when you're dealing with an individual, and that's true of the whites and their offspring, white Europeans, white Asians, white Arabs, white Hindus, white pseudo-Native Americans, all non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit people. Only black people can be called Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit because we're the only people with the Ka and the Kayat and the Ba and the Ba'ed, the divine living energy connected to Ra and Ra'ed. Not just talking about lower level electromagnetic energy that has motive power. We're talking about the actual divine energy coming directly from Ra and Ra'ed that permeates our being. They don't have that. So that's the difference between us, and then it manifests as physical deficiencies as well with them. So they can't see. They don't have a view of the world. They can't attune to the shaping forces that undergird creation, which are the divinities. They can't attune, of course, to the ancestral spirits, the spiritually cultivated ancestral spirits, because they are repulsive. Both of them repel the whites and their offspring, just like your body repels cancerous cells. All the forces of nature repel them. The Supreme Being repels them. The non-anomalous Samantha repels them. And, of course, we do when we're in our normal state, unless we're brainwashed, we try to accept something that's repulsive. The only time your body tries to accept toxins or cancer cells and so forth is if it's drugged and it's still not trying to accept. It's weak when it's trying to defend itself. But when it's operating normally, it destroys them, it repels them. So they can't see. They can't receive information from the abosome because they're repelled by the abosome. Just like the large magnet on the table repels the other magnet and pushes it across the table. So if it's reaching out to try to get information, the repulsion knocks that emanation back. And there's no exchange of energy, no exchange of information. The whites and offspring can sit down and pour libation and imitate rituals to the abosome and orisha and will do all day long, and all they will get is repulsion. They will never get any communication at all. They will never get possessed. They will never get communication ever. So let's get into that, and we'll see what they've been doing and how they've been passing off fake possessions from discarnate, wayward, criminal, deceased spirits as deities. And they're making people feel mystical because they think they did something. The worldview. We have an image of Ptah-Hotep. He says in what is called the oldest book in the world, the oldest composition, written composition in the form of a book, a structured composition, so far unearthed in the world, the precepts of Ptah-Hotep, and this is from that oldest book. So the oldest book in the world, so far unearthed. Ptah-Hotep says, the wise one who acts with Ma'at is free of falsehood. Great is Ma'at, it is everlasting. Ma'at has been unchanged since the time of all stars. So we're talking about what is the difference between truth and falsehood, and people begin to truncate and corrupt the proper worldview because our worldview is rooted in divine order. And of course, this whole book, Maat and Falsehood, is about the expansive and contractive poles of divine order, which we call Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe. So let's get into it. The quotes above were written by Ptah-Hotep nearly 5,000 years ago in ancient Kemet. He was the Chati, or the chief advisor of the Pera, or the Amsu Tet Kara, the king. He was 110 years of age, Ptah-Hotep was. He dictated a series of instructions in ethical behavior to be recorded for the benefit of his posterity, in particular, and for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Africans, black people in general. And we say the instructions of Ptah-Hotep are part and parcel of the accumulated wisdom of over 1 million generations of earthly experience, which is the inheritance of all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. They embody the fruits of incorporating the energy and consciousness of Ma'a and Ma'at, the male and female abosome of divine law and balance within our spirit. And of course, we did a broadcast on the male divinity Ma'a and his relationship to Ma'a, because many people have never heard of Ma'a, and there's misinformation and imbalanced information being taught with regard to Ma'at, but not the divinity Ma'a. So we say understanding the reality of Ma'a and Ma'at. Ma'a, law, is Mara in Akan, meaning law. That's why we put that in parentheses. Is critical to our functioning properly, harmoniously in creation. We have demonstrated previously that the terms law and love, Ma'a and Ma'a, Me and Me in Coptic, are in reality the same word and concept, phonetically and conceptually in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral culture. And earlier in the book, this is page 48, but earlier in the book we go into detail proving that the terms Me, meaning law, and Me, meaning love, law and love is the same concept in our culture. To be in, quote-unquote, love is to be in law with an individual or entity, meaning your thoughts, intentions, and actions. Your interaction with that individual or entity is a reflection of divine order. It's an expression of divine order. So that's a lawful relationship or loveful relationship. Love and love is the same word. In ancient Kemet, in the Coptic dialect, the term for law is Me. The term for love is Me, because it's the same word, the same concept. There's no falling in love and falling out of love. Ma'a and Ma'at are the male and female forces of divine law. You don't fall in Ma'a and Ma'at. You don't fall into a deity, fall out of a deity. We have a different conception. We have a proper view of what love and law really is. So we said early in the book we talk about that. Then we say we will now focus on the reality of law and its relationship to order and good And this is what's key to the whole worldview of Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people. Rooted in divine order, the expansive and contractive poles that make up divine order. We have this Ebe, divine wisdom teaching, Nyame wa Nyame, which is Amenet Amen, the Supreme Being, Ambo Bani. Amenet Amen, the Supreme Being, does not create evil or disorder. Bani means evil or disorder. In Akan language, Bani means evil or disorder in the language of ancient Kemet. And you can see that in the Medutu and the hieroglyphics. We say the above truism is critical to the proper understanding of the nature of Ma'a, Ma'at, Mara, and Tri law. For the Achiwadyefo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, have perverted concepts of divine law and by extension, order and good, in order to make Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit, foolishly succumb to the false idea that evil is part of divine order. As a result, there are a series of false, foolish beliefs and concepts that some Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit have taken from the Achiwadyefo and incorporated as part of the fabric of a corrupt belief system. This corrupt belief system is then promoted as the African worldview. And as you listen, you'll see what we're talking about, because you've heard some people propound this misinformation. The actual worldview of Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people is not subjective. It is the proper, full view of the world, and we just went over that. Note that in the Medutu, the hieroglyphics, the terms Ma'al, Ma'at carry the definitions law, balance, truth, that which is straight, unwavering. These terms also carry the definitions to see, to examine, to perceive, to inspect, sight, vision, and are spelled with the determinative symbol of the eye. So you see that eye in these different terms, representing the divine eye of the Supreme Being. That same eye that gave birth to us as Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people is the same eye of intuition or insight into the nature of things, because we can attune through the divine energy that comes from the eye of Ra that created us. Is the same divine energy, the Bayet, that links us with the energy of the various forces in nature that animate sun, moon, stars, black substance of space, oceans, rivers, thunder, lightning, and so forth. And since we can link with them, we can attune to them and know them and harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with them. So we have a full view of the world. So we say the determinative symbol of that eye representing the divine eye of the Supreme Being. This demonstrates the reality that when you are in tune with Ma'ah and Ma'at, law or truth, you have insight, represented by that eye, into the divine forces that undergird all of creation. You have a proper, full, comprehensive world view. View in italics, because you literally have that view based on that divine eye. Only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit can have a proper, full, comprehensive view of the world, because only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit are connected to the various abosom, inclusive of Ma'a and Ma'at, who are the spirits governing the world. The worldview of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people is therefore founded upon our unique capacity to fully engage all aspects of creation. So we go further and we talk about, in the next section, we talk about, similar to what we've already spoken about with regard to Abadie, the created universe, is not just composed of material entities, but also the spiritual forces that undergird or animate the black substance of space. The suns, the moon, stars, planets, rivers, mountains, winds, plant life, land masses. These spiritual agencies are the forces in nature. They are called abosom, Orisha and Vodou and Arusi and so forth. Ntorotu in ancient Kemet, but also in Akan as well. We say our unique capacity to receive, retain, and harmonize with the energy and consciousness of the abosom that animate, govern the entire Abadie or created universe, provides Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit with a full experience of Abadie, the created universe, and therefore the proper, full view of the world. That's the only way you can have a full view. If you can attune to the forces that govern all of creation, because your energy links with theirs, and your soul, your divine consciousness links with theirs, only through that process can you have a full view of the world. If you can't do that, then you can't have a full view of creation. So it must be understood that non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit, non-Africans, non-blacks have never, do not now, and will never share in this capacity. There are clear distinctions, physiological and spiritual, that separate Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit from all other ethnic groups. Therefore, when such concepts as the European, Eurocentric worldview, Asian worldview, Arab worldview, so-called Native American worldview, etc., are spoken of, it must be realized that by definition, these are truncated views of the world based on the limited capacities, physical and spiritual, of these groups. However, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit worldview is not simply our perspective of the world. It is the only fully integrated, meaning actual view of Abadieh, of creation, as it is. Now, and we read that, but we had already described the reason behind these statements. So we gave the reasons first. When you read the book, you'll see. And earlier in the book, we go into detail, of course, of how this all unfolds. So we say when the corruption of the proper full view of the world, our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit worldview is promoted amongst and accepted by Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, the corruption causes us to accept things, objects, deeds, and entities that are destructive to us. The corruption also causes us to engage in self-destructive behavior, all the while producing the most foolish rationalizations for the continued acceptance of said destructive and self-destructive things, objects, deeds, and entities. This leads to the acceptance on various levels of the Achiwadifo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, because we have been foolish enough to incorporate the belief that the Achiwadifo are part of the created or the divine order, which they absolutely are not. Now, well, we're just going to read this other section, and we're going to get into some more information. One of the meanings of the word ma'al and kamet is to see, to inspect, again with the determinative medut, or the hieroglyphic symbol of the eye. So ma'al means truth or balance in law, but it also means to see, to inspect. The corruption of our worldview is accomplished by the Achiwadifo working to influence us to reject ma'al, ma'at, truth, balance, law, through the rejection of ma'al, sight or insight. Spiritual blindness and spiritual imbalance are the results of such rejection, or when you are blind with respect to your position or orientation into your divine function in space and time, you are out of balance with ma'an, ma'at. So ma'an, ma'at deal with balance, of course, truth and law, but ma'at also means insight. If you're influenced to reject them, then you become spiritually blind and spiritually imbalanced, because you're not in harmony with ma'al, truth, balance, and ma'al, sight, insight. So you're out of balance. You're out of balance with the law, but you're also out of balance with chi, which means to hate. This is disalignment with Inyame wa Inyame, divine order, in order to eradicate blind adherence by Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, to a corrupted worldview and restore balance, realign ourselves to order. We must understand the extent to which our knowledge of ma'an, ma'at, of law has been infected. So then we get into the corruption of the worldview, the beginning of it, and how did it start. Now, before we even get into that, just to draw an analogy, a picture, an image, if you see a lion or lioness, a jatanini, jatabere, as we say in our Khan culture, and they're captured in Ghana, thrown in a cage and brought to America. If you release them into nature, they're going to function the same way. If they have children, cubs, and jata, poro, and so forth, lion cubs and so forth, they're going to function the same way they did if they were on the continent. Those cubs grow up and they have children, they're going to function the same way. They don't all of a sudden become American lions because they were dropped off in America. The same Jata Nini, Jata Bele, they have the same identity that they had when they were brought over here, and all of their children have the same identity. They don't become part of an American culture because they're over here and become part of some kind of identity genetically and so forth because they were dropped over here. In fact, there were no lions in America anyway, so they're the only ones who were over here. The same is true of us when we're forced over here into the Western Hemisphere during the enslavement process. We come over here, we're confronted with the whites and their offspring, whether it's white Europeans or white pseudo-Native Americans. We're Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. We have children, they're Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. They have children, they're Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, physically, genetically, but also the spirits that enter those wombs are the ancestresses and ancestors of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. That is our identity. So moving to another landmass is not all of a sudden going to change our identity. If the woman had a baby and was thrown on a plane and flown to China, the baby is born in China, it doesn't come out with white skin and straight eyes and dead straight hair, and therefore it's Chinese because you switched landmasses. It's the same, and if intergenerationally, if you keep having babies in China, they're not going to be Chinese because you had the babies in China. They don't lose their identity. Physiologically, they don't lose it spiritually based on Debra, or the return of the spirit, reincarnation. The flip side is also true. When these Chinese criminals are invading the continent of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, and setting up shop like in Ghana and Uganda and other places, they're marrying each other and having babies. They're having Chinese children, of course, Asian children. Those children grow up. They marry each other. They have children. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 generations down the line, there's still Asians being raised up in Afuraka, Afuraitkai. They're Asians genetically, they're Asians perversely, spiritually. They're not African, quote unquote, because they've switched landmass. They look the same and they have the same spirit that keeps returning, the same corrupt ancestor spirit that keeps returning. So when we come over here, we just talked about our collective Kadine. We have the flesh of Ra and Ra'et that can contain the energy of Ra and Ra'et, and the soul, the divine consciousness of Ka and Ka'et. Because we have that, that's what makes us literally Afuraikanu, Afuraitkaitnit, children of Ra and Ra'et, with a soul, a divine consciousness, and a flesh that can contain that kind of energy. A brown or black flesh that has the capacity to hold on to that energy fully. That's what makes us who we are. The spirit that enters our spirit is animated by Ra and Ra'et. The soul that is attached to our spirit is a miniature Ka and Ka'et, and our flesh carries that energy properly, fully, because we're not melanin recessive. So our flesh can do that. That's our identity, based on reincarnation, based on the nature of our spiritual anatomy. That does not change because we switch continents because somebody forced us to be enslaved in America. This is why in Akwamamai we say, Wotumi fra moja nso wotumi fra okrawa, which means you can mix blood, but you cannot mix the soul. Even when people were raped and tortured and so forth, when a black woman grows up in America and she's had ancestresses and ancestors, some of whom were raped generations back, but she's a light brown Afurakani, Afuraitkait woman, her spirit came from the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit side. And because her spirit is that same ancestral spirit who has returned, yes, she has returned this time through a womb where because of the miscegenation, because of the rape, because of the criminality, the skin will be lighter brown than it normally will be. It's not going to be deep, dark brown in certain instances because of the rape. But the spirit, that ancestral spirit who lived once before in Ghana or in Kumasi or in the Oyo Empire or in different areas, that same spirit returns through their descendants and gets into the womb. This time when it's born, it has a lighter brown skin. But the soul cannot be mixed. The blood may be mixed, but the soul cannot be mixed. So we're the same individuals, the same spirits with the same soul. So spiritually, our identity is sealed and physiologically as well. So when we go from different places, we're the same people. It's maintained, and the culture associated with our spirit and our soul is maintained. That which is encoded within us pre-incarnation is maintained. That's why we can access it wherever we are. And that's why our Nananom and Samampo can give us information to help us align ourselves wherever we are. This is why we are not dependent upon anybody from the continent or from anywhere else outside of our own blood circle to recover our culture, because it's encoded within us by Inyame wa Inyame, and the Nananom and Samampo who are assigned to us guide us towards that realignment. The Abosom who come into the world with us guide us towards that realignment as long as we attune to them. We can collaborate and get information from other people if we would like to, but what determines our identity is the construction of our spirit, and that is formed before we even get into the womb. So you can't be legitimized in culture by somebody else. That's insane. And I know some Negroes will go and spend thousands of dollars to go get a little title or a little name or a little pseudo-initiation or whatever it is, and then come back to America thinking they've done something. That means nothing. That means you collaborated with some people. The legitimacy of who you are and the validation of who you are is encoded within your spirit before you even get into the womb. And only your Nsamanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors, and your direct blood relatives who are living can validate or legitimize your identity and your function in creation by recognizing that. Those are the only people. Nobody else can do that. And we need to understand that so we can stop wasting time and stop wasting money and do the real work, which is it's easier to go and sit under somebody and let them fill you up with a whole bunch of information. You just obey what they say and do whatever and imitate exactly what they do and mimic what they do and give your best impersonation of a contemporary continental Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person, as opposed to having to go and sit under your Nsamanfo and get detailed information, and then throughout the course of your life be able to validate that information, convey it, and then share it with your own people, and then they engage that same investigative process as well and uncover that information that's buried within their own craft and bring it forward and prove that which was encoded within them. That's more detailed, difficult work because it doesn't have that same precedent. But it's also more rewarding as well because you get the culture uncut. And then you get confirmations of what you've been taught on a daily basis. So we want to show that the identity, we don't lose our identity. It's impossible. So, and we've also carried the cultures over here in the form of hoodoo in North America and voodoo in North America and juju in North America, as well as obia in Jamaica and candomblé in its pure form in Brazil and Lukumi and Cuba and so forth, and Vodun and Haiti, all these different places, wherever we have gone, the Akan tradition, Winti in Suriname, wherever we've gone, we carry the traditions with us. They never stop. It's these traditions that we've carried not from ancient Kana, ancient Nubia, Kemet, through Ghana, West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, into the Western Hemisphere, the same spiritual traditions, the connection with the forces of nature, the connection with the Nananom and Samamfo, motivated us, empowered us to overcome enslavement, overthrow the whites and their offspring, wage war against them, free ourselves from that in enslavement because of the consistent wars, insurrections, resistance movements, and put us in the position where we broke the shackles of enslavement. And now we're in the position, if our ancestors could do that, which they did, they set that precedent. Now we can use that same culture that's thousands of years old to give us insight and motivation in how to properly move forward and fully free ourselves and restore our sovereignty and defend our sovereignty. And that's what the culture is about. That's what ODWIRA purification is about. So that's dealing with identity. Now getting to the worldview, once you understand that your identity can't be stripped from you because of what somebody has done to you, now you need to understand what they've done mentally. So we say the whites and their offspring, the Achiwadiefo. Now we are on page 50. For those who didn't know, began to solidify deliberate perversion of concepts, ritual practices, symbols, worldview, and more in a major way after the Greek invasion of ancient Kemet. This began about 2,300 years ago. What they would say 332 BC, around that time, Greek invasion, major. Of course, there were the Persians before them and Assyrians, but once the Greeks finally got in, it was a more entrenched corruption in the northern part of Kemet, followed by the Roman, Arab, and other European invasions of Kemet and the white Aryan invasions and occupation of the Harappa Valley, ancient Black India, at around the same time, of course. These perversions continued as some Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit were captured and or enslaved and accepted the pseudo-religious practices of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Gnosticism, Kabbalism, Sufism, Hinduism, Vedanta, Buddhism, etc. These cosmological perversions were crystallized. We're going back 2,300 years and coming forward. Solidified, continued, and then crystallized amongst some of our people over the past 2,300 years. As some of us migrated from east and north, Afuraka, Afuraitkait, to central, west, and south, Afuraka, Afuraitkait, after the fall of Kemet and parts of Knesset, Nubia to the Greeks, Romans, and Arabs, as well as the fall of the civilizations of northwest Afuraka, Afuraitkait to the Romans and Arabs, a small percentage, and that's all it takes, of our people became carriers of these perverse beliefs of the Achiwadifo. These perverse beliefs would infect the proper notions of the physical world, the spirit world, and the nature of the reality within a small segment of the population. The central theme of the cosmological corruptions of the Achiwadifo is the corruption of proper notions of Maranechi, law, and hate, the two complementary poles of Inyame wa Inyame and Sheshe, divine order. Through law, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to harmonize with divine order, and through hate, we reject or we repel those things, objects, deeds, and entities, individuals we need to reject, to repel in order to maintain balance within our lives. Those are the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. Law or love and hate, expansion and contraction. You expand through incorporation, incorporating thoughts, ideas, intentions, actions that are in harmony with the law. That's expansion, incorporating law. And then contraction, repulsion, rejecting things, rejecting deeds, rejecting objects, rejecting individuals that would otherwise create disorder within your system, within yourself, within your spirit. Those are the two poles of divine order, law and hate. There are deities of hate, Benna and Abinna, Herubehudet, Techima. There's deities of law or love, Ma'a and Ma'at. And they are the two poles of divine order. So whenever you think divine order, if you're not thinking law and hate, divine law and divine hate, then you have no understanding of divine order. So this is what we bring out in this whole book is about Maat and Falsehood, divine law and divine hate, to bring the proper understanding of the worldview, the full worldview. Their key is to destroy the proper understanding of the worldview of divine order and its two poles, divine law and divine hate. In this section, we talk about the proper notions of Mara or Ma'a, law, as well as its corruption. In our culture, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture, order and good are the same concept. We just talked about the two complementary poles. There's an epe or divine wisdom teaching, so-called proverb in our Kam culture. Osansase, adye a inyame, aye nina ye. The hawk says that all that Inyame did, created, is good. So everything that Inyame wa and Inyame created is good. It shows that, this is just an example, the Akan recognize that all of what Inyame wa Inyame created and creates is in harmony with order is good. It must be realized, however, that all things that exist in the world were not created by Inyame wa Inyame. So everything that the Supreme Being creates or directs to be created is good. Inyame wa Inyame does not embrace evil or disorder. Only that which is orderly, and therefore that which is good. Good and order is the same thing. So, we talk about the coca plant, of course, is a naturally occurring plant. That's natural. It's a natural creation. The whites and their offspring come and see the coca plant that's been around for centuries, millennia, and so forth. They take that coca plant, create a perverse process that they take that plant through and create a product, crack cocaine, that has never existed in the world before. It exists. It was made, but it wasn't created by the Supreme Being. It didn't come into being via divine fiat, via divine sanction. It exists, but it was not created with a capital C. It was not divinely created. And it was not inspired by the Supreme Being to be created. The whites and offspring went against divine order to make this thing. So it was made, but it wasn't created with a capital C. So everything in the world that exists was not created. Some things were made. The whites and their offspring, a melanin receptive body and a spirit without a soul, that's not a creation of the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being, directing Ra and Ra'ed to create, only created Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people with spirits, with a Ba, a Ba'at, and a soul, Ka, Ka'at, and we were here for millions of years. And a small percentage of our people engage in perversity. It's like a small percentage of your cells become cancerous, begin to reject their proper functioning in the body, and the immune system isolates the cancer cells and kills them. The small percentage of cancerous cells within the body of black humanity begin to reject what they should be doing, and they repel their cry, repel the Al-Prawa. Now they're spirits without a soul, and that divine living energy leaves them as well, and they're just animated beings without a soul, without a conscience or divine living energy. And they function in a disordered, discordant way, just like the cancerous cells become disfigured in your body. They don't have the same shape and form as the regular cells, and they operate in a malfunctioning, malnourished, corrupt fashion, a discordant fashion, not a harmonious fashion with the other cells. They try to consume all the others. Same with these cancerous cells in our black body. Some of them were drawn up into northern Eurasia. And they developed as cancerous cells and began to reproduce and proliferate, just like cancerous cells do. And if their development is not arrested, cancerous cells will take over the body, and they have moved from Europe to try to consume everything in their path, metastasizing along the way. They've been doing that for thousands of years, and typically we have crushed them militarily for thousands of years of them waging war against us. War after war after war, we've crushed them. It's only really recently, over the past couple of hundred years, that they've gained the upper hand. But they're fighting a battle now because, on one hand, their population growth rate has been negative for decades. So the whites and their offspring have always been a minority in America, for example, even though they say they've been the majority. They weren't coming over here by the millions in boats and being forced to have 10, 15, and 20 babies every young woman. And every baby growing up that's a young woman, then them being forced to have 10, 15, and 20 babies to make more slaves and so forth, while other people are being brought, packed like sardines on ships, generation after generation after generation for hundreds of years. They weren't coming to America at that level. And they were not reproducing in those little 13 colonies at that level. It was not happening. Our population exploded and dwarfed theirs. We've always been the majority here. Of course, the whites and their offspring will lie about that. They can't have us recognizing that we are the majority, because then we'll have a different mindset. We'll say, wait a minute, we can crush them. So they have to make us believe that we're surrounded. They got us surrounded. We're just a little tiny minority, always talking about we're 13% of the population. They've been saying that for 20 years. It's nonsense. But they're a minority in the world. White Europeans, for example, whether it's in Europe or America, they're less than 10% of the world population. And they're shrinking. So although they've dominated over the past couple of hundred years, mainly the past 150 years, really about 120 years mainly, with the rise of the British Empire and so forth, now their population is disappearing. The same is true with the Arabs as well. Not only is the population shrinking, but then, of course, rampant dissexuality, homosexuality, which also shrinks the potential population. This is why they're trying to force that perversity on our people to destroy our society, because they know the more of us who engage in that filth will be less likely to have the numbers of children we would normally have, and that's already rampant in their societies, not just in Europe and America, but all throughout the Arab world and India and so forth, even though they pretend that they're not engaged in that because they're Muslims. It's rampant, and it has always been, because that is their nature. They're perverse by nature. They've always been that way. And it's all over the place. Just like with the Christian Catholic priests, and they're all faggots and dealing with boys and so forth. The same is true of these Muslim imams. Same is true of these Jewish rabbis. Same is true of these Hindus and so forth. And these Asians, they've all been involved in that all along. They try to promote to our people that they're not, but they've always been involved in that. And that, of course, greatly curtails the potential for them to reproduce, but even just physiologically, they're not reproducing. So they've had the upper hand for over 100 years, but now they're losing the battle of population. So they're swinging out wildly because they see they're going down. So they're trying to take as many of us with them through chemical and biological warfare and promoting dissexuality and interracial coupling and anything to destroy our people. Of course, mass incarceration, murdering our people, filling our communities here and around the world with drugs and so forth, diseases, anything they can do. But they're losing that battle, and we need to help them accelerate those losses. So we go into detail about things that are made but not natural, including the white snare offspring. So, but everything that's created by the Supreme Being is good. We only have 2.5 minutes left in the broadcast. If you would like to listen past 11 o'clock, you must call in. The number is 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. You have about 2.5 minutes to call in, because after 11 o'clock, then you won't be able to hear on the internet. Only the people on the phone who have already called in before 11 will be able to continue to hear, and then you can also hit the number 1 to raise your hand if you have a question or comment and so forth. But 657-383-0635. And just even before we finish that, we meant to mention, for those who don't know, we have 15 books that we have published. The ebook versions are all free online. The softcover versions we do publish and print in-house on our own printers in color. They only range between $8 and $11, so please support our softcover publications on our publications page, the NHOMA page. This is what allows us to have the free classes. We do presentations in different. We do not charge, and we always give away a free copy of one of our books to everybody who attends. We have free workshops dealing with substance abuse abstinence. We have a ritual methods for people to overcome that, as well as domestic abuse, intergenerational trauma. We also have the No Quade Po distributor program, where people can employ themselves through the selling of our softcover publications immediately. No matter what your past work history is, you can purchase the books from us wholesale, sell them retail, generate income for yourself, while you're empowering the community at the same time, giving the community information about natural health that can help save their lives, about smoking and drinking and everything, and how to get off of that, natural health, natural foods, true story, true historical information, culture, ancestral religion. You can not only enrich their lives, repair relationships with their families, but also, empower themselves economically as well. We have trainings and so forth dealing with employment and entrepreneurship. We also have our Akongwa Suya page, where we're building an institution and we're trying to acquire this property. So we have a GoFundMe campaign to assist with that. So if you would like to make a contribution, anybody who contributes to that, you will receive one or more of our books for your donation. So it's like a purchase anyway, not just a donation. So we appreciate those who have supported, and please continue to do so. And we'll put the link of that in the chat room as well. It's GoFundMe.com/IQM 3BW. That's the GoFundMe campaign, so you can deal with that. So let us finish this section. And so we already talked about good and order is the same thing. Nyame wa nyame only creates that which is good. And we started off saying nyame wa nyame ambo bani, the Supreme Being does not create evil or disorder, only that which is good. That's Akan, proverb, epe, divine wisdom teaching. So then we go to the language and the culture of ancient Kemet to get that further confirmation. We have that in the Akan tradition. Of course, across the continent, you'll find the same concepts. The Supreme Being does not create evil or disorder, bani, only that which is orderly, therefore that which is good. So let's see what we say about that in ancient Kemet. With Ra, the creator of the universe, says in the coffin text, number 1130, from the so-called 12th dynasty, I made the four winds so that every person, talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, of course, who only existed at the time, every person might breathe in his or her time and place. I made every person like his or her fellow. I did not instruct them to do evil. It was their own hearts that caused them to disobey that which I instructed. So, in this text, as we say, we see that the creator of the universe states that he did not instruct anyone to do evil. Evil came from the heart, meaning engaging in disorder. They decided, came from the hearts of those individuals who committed it. Evil exists, yet it is a manifestation of disobedience to the command of Ra, for Ra only commands that which is good, meaning orderly. Some people will try to say, well, evil and good are two halves of a whole. Pure foolishness. That's white culture. And you have some Negroes here, as well as on the continent, trying to weave that nonsense into the worldview, which is why we shut that down in this text. Now, we can skip over this other section real quick and get right to that point. Oh, let me scroll back down. So we want you to see this particular section, and this is why we pull out the chef du Ani, the papyrus of Ani. We talk about Ra and Ra'et, direct Al-Sar and Al-Set to become king and queen, and establish civilization, which is a social order pattern after the divine order in Afuraka, Afuraitkait. This is why Ptah Hetep, in his effort to transmit divine wisdom, as we read earlier, states that Ma'at is everlasting. It has been unchanged since the time of Al-Sar. He also says the wise one who acts with Ma'at is free of falsehood. If you are wise, Nyansa in Akan, you are one who acts with Ma'at, law, and are free of falsehood. This means that if you are unwise, you act without Ma'at and are enslaved or bound by falsehood. You are not free. We show from the text, the papyrus of Ani, the heart is being weighed against the feather. If the heart does not balance out the lightness of the feather and the heart is weighed down, the spiritual heart is weighed down with disorder. The only way it can be light is if you're not holding on to any disorder. If it outweighs the feather, then you lose that weighing of the scale. You're not in harmony, you're not in balance. The slightest disorder throws it off. So that judgment scene is dealing with the fact that the Supreme Being doesn't allow you to move into the ancestral realm if your heart is weighed down by disorder, because the Supreme Being does not direct disorder to come into being. So we talk about that. We describe some of that information. And we don't have to read all through that information. We do have a couple of quotes. It says, decreed is it that which comes forth from my mouth, ma'ah, true and righteous is the scribe Ani, ma'ah keru. He has not sinned, meaning he has not created abominations, perversity. He has not done evil with respect to the abosom. Therefore, let not amot therefore prevail over him. So when the person is at the weighing of the heart, when he makes his transition, he's before the tribunal of the deities to see if he can move forward and live in the ancestral realm in peace. First, they have to weigh his heart to see if he was living a harmonious lifestyle. And when he passed that test, because he didn't have any evil or sin or evil in his heart, then the divinity of wisdom, Tahuti, we call Bre Kiri Kunuate in Akan, divine wisdom, which is not just a title of Supreme Being, that's an actual abosom. He declares that there's no evil or disorder in the heart of this particular individual. He can move forward. And then the individual also confirms that in his speech to Asar or Awusir, who's called Awusi in Akan. Tahuti, the divine wisdom, has declared this individual free of disorder and can therefore be given the title Ma'al Keru, meaning true Ma'al, of voice, one who speaks the divine law. Voice is the divine law. Ma'al Keru or Ma'al Ke, which is Mara She, one who speaks law or legislates in Akan culture. It's the same concept. So, it says, falsehood, the term written Ged or Geg in the Medutu, is representative of disorder or evil. This is why Ptah Hetep says that the wise one who acts with Ma'at is free of falsehood. The truth speaker is Ma'al Keru or Ma'at Keru, the one who speaks the truth or divine law. And then we have a couple of other quotes from different texts. The key is that in all these different quotes that you can read through later, the incorporation of Ma'at is an act of wisdom. When you embrace wisdom, you are free of falsehood and protected from the perception, incorporation of, and suffering from disorder or evil. This is the most poignant demonstration from our ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkait ancestral culture of the reality that the proper notions of right and wrong exist and are identified and addressed by divinity. This reality is a common thread linking all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral cultures, past, present, and future, for it is the way of Inyamewa, Inyame, and Sheshe. When you embrace the whites and their offspring, there are certain foolish ideas that they try to force on us. Good and evil are two halves of a whole. Good and evil are relative. What's good for one is evil for another. Truth is relative. Right and wrong are relative. There's no absolute good and absolute evil. The only absolute is God. These are all foolish ideas. Good and evil are part of a continuum. We just need to learn how to strike the balance within this continuum. Pure foolishness. Good and evil are not two halves of a whole, and we're going to get into that. Then some people say, well, we can't place human values upon the abosom, the orisha, the vodou. Their standards are different. Foolishness. Anybody who says that is people who are not in communication with the abosom, because the abosom, orisha, vodou despise evil and speak that on a regular basis. They'll say some abosom, orisha, vodou are bad, work with whites. Some of them work with whites. Some of them do evil. Some tell lies. Some of them get drunk and smoke and fight and argue, accept human sacrifice, and work with churches. Some deities work with mosques and work with synagogues and work with Masonic orders and foolishness like aliens and all of that is nonsense. So anybody talking that nonsense, talking about the abosom, orisha, just little spirits just like we are, and we tell them what to do, and if they don't do what we want them to do, we go to another deity. Pure foolishness. You know you're dealing with somebody who has no understanding of the culture. They have been trained by these infected elders on the continent, pseudo-elders on the continent who have been infected with Islam, not dealing with real deities, but are dealing with discarnate spirits being passed off as deities and have been doing so intergenerationally. And these little weak, drug-addicted, alcoholic-type individuals who died and now are serving these little priests, pseudo-spiritualists, those are the kind of spirits they work with. And they're still full of vice and lust and malice, and they'll do certain things for the spiritualist. They'll go spy on somebody, eavesdrop on somebody, come back and tell the spiritualist what the person is thinking and doing in their house. And when the person comes to the spiritualist for a reading, the spiritualist will say, this is what you were doing in your house this morning, and this is what you were thinking, and this is who you were talking to. They'll say, wow, how did you know that? You must be dealing with the deities because you weren't at my house, and how could you know what I was thinking in my head? Because some little crackhead alcoholic spirit that they were working with was in your house listening in. It has nothing to do with divinity. It has to do with criminality. And they feed through blood sacrifice and other kinds of offerings these little crack spirits, give them little energy through a blood sacrifice that's not sanctioned by any abosom, just any little sacrifice. They'll kill anything just to release a surge of energy to feed these little spirits. They'll do whatever the person says, just like if you've given alcoholics some alcohol or promised them some money, they'll do whatever you say if you give them that money for the drug, and so forth. These are the kind of spirits that these individuals are working with. These are the kind of spirits these Muslims who proliferate these talismans all over West and Central Afuraka, Afuraitkait, these little spirits associated with these little talismans that they falsely refer to as voodoo, falsely refer to as abosom, falsely refer to as orisha. These are the little spirits that work with these talismans. And they say they're a powerful priest, and they have all these shrines, and they have so much power, and they can work with, priests and Christian ministers and Muslim imams to help them get more people, and they'll put the little spirit in the church to help them pull more people to the church. Yes, they'll put a little spirit shrine in the church, little criminal spirit, little criminal while they were on earth, and when they died, they're still a criminal. Those little criminal spirits that go around trying to convince people to come into the church, weighing on them when they're sleeping, when they're walking throughout the course of the day, constantly fusing those thoughts into them, and they'll start coming to the church and giving money to the church. These kind of spiritualists, pseudo-spiritualists, this is the kind of stuff they do. They're not dealing with any real abosom because the abosom repels them, have nothing to do with them. The real forces in nature that govern the sun and the moon and the earth, mother, and the oceans have nothing to do with these Negroes. So all they can work with is these little criminal spirits. And then they pass them off as deities, and the ignorant and the unwitting will embrace that nonsense. And this has been going on for hundreds of years. If you're involved in a culture, you know who the little criminal pseudo-spiritualists are and the real priests and priestesses are. If you're not involved in the culture, then you assume that what these spiritualists are doing are real. And these are where these rationalizations come from, good and evil, two halves of a whole, because these criminal spirits want you to accept them and not reject them because they can't continue to do what they do if you identify them as evil and seek to eradicate them and repel them. They can't continue to feed off of you like a parasite. So if they can make you believe that evil is part of, quote-unquote, God's divine plan, and if you reject evil instead of trying to balance evil out, then if you're trying to exterminate it or eradicate evil, then you're going against the divine order. Some of our people have fallen into that idiocy. And as we said earlier, going back 2,300 years with the Greeks and Romans and later, these are when these foolish concepts of moral relativism and all this nonsense first began to show up. So we go into detail about that in this section. And we talk about the doctrine of conflictual opposites. There's a pseudo-white doctrine, the doctrine of relativism, pseudo-white doctrine in the East. Western Europeans as well as Eastern Europeans and Asians and so forth, the same nonsense is promoted through Vedanta, Hinduism, Kabbalism, Sufism, in schools of psychology, pseudo-spirituality, pseudo-New Age spirituality. But you find it amongst pseudo-Afrocentric individuals who claim to be African-centered, Afrocentric, Africentric practitioners or ones who promote the African worldview. And then they go right back to this nonsense of good and evil is two halves of a whole, and we just need to balance it out, and there's no absolute except the Creator, and all of that is pure misinformation. And they got that from the whites and their offspring, and they're promoting it as the African worldview. We just proved through the ancient texts that the Creator did not create evil at all. When the sun, moon, stars, the earth mother fashioned, oceans, rivers, thunder and lightning, and the abosom spirits are sent to take up residence in these entities, and they're functioning in harmony. Where's the evil? There's creation, been around for millions of years. There's life in creation. Where is the evil? If evil always existed, where's the evil in the planet Earth? Where's the evil in the sun? Where's the evil in the abosome that animates the planet Earth, the abosome that animates even before we're created, before the insects and so forth are created. There's still a creation. So if you're saying evil is from the beginning of the world, where's the evil in the oceans and the rivers and the stars and the sun and the black substance of space? It's stupidity. The whites and their offspring use this as a political ploy to make you embrace evil as part of the divine order so you cannot reject them. They are spirits of disorder. When you recognize that, you will seek to exterminate them as opposed to trying to embrace them as part of the human family. They can't have you do that because they're parasites and they want to continue to dominate us. And the only way they can do that is if we accept them. If we recognize them for who we are, we go to war against them. And it took them thousands of years to figure that out. They used to try to just wage war against us and they would lose for thousands of years. Then they realized they need to corrupt the religion to change the mindset of the people, and that took them thousands of years, and it's finally catching on. This is where Christianity comes from, Islam, Judaism, and all their fake characters who never existed. So we go into detail about all of that in those next pages. We talk about we must understand the gravity of the infection of our Amamre culture by the Achiwadifo in order for us to remove the infection. So you can have, for example, and even before we get to that, we talked about the black substance of space, how the stars are black bodies formed from spheres carved out of that black substance. The first spheres that are carved out by Ra and Ra, that black substance become the black bodies, which become stars and begin to illuminate when Ra and Ra energy moves through them. If you have clay, and then you take the clay and you fashion it into jars and pots and sculptures, it went from a state of non-order or being unformed into a state of order, ordered into jars and pots and sculptures. Went from unformed to formed. And then you can change it back to unformed and take those jars and collapse them back into the clay and make it unformed once again. If you go from unformed or non-order into a state of order, order jars and pots and sculptures, and you leave the sculptures there, that's the balance. It went from non-order to order, unformed to formed. The balance of the formed is the unformed. The balance of the unformed is the formed. That's the balance in creation. If somebody comes along with a hammer and breaks up the pots and the jars you just made against your will and scatters the pieces all over the floor, that is disorder, a corruption of the created order. It is not the balance of the created order, it is a corruption of the order. The balance of the ordered pots was the unordered clay. The balance of the formed is the unformed. That's the balance. The formed piece, and somebody comes along and destroys the formed, and it becomes perverted. That is a perversion of the form, not a balance of the form. The black substance of space is the unformed substance. Some of it is fashioned into stars and planets and so forth. That's the formed aspect. It went from unformed, nothingness, to formed. If somebody comes along inside one of the planets and begins to set off bombs and explosions that destroys the earth and pollutes the atmosphere and so forth, that is a perversion of that which is formed, is not the balance of what is formed. The Supreme Being creates the balance of unformed to formed. That's what is formed is also that which is what is good. When somebody destroys that which is formed, that's a perversion of the form. That's disorder. That's the evil. It's a perversion of the order. It's not a balance of the order. The whites and their offspring are a perversion of humanity. They're not the balance of us. The balance of the black man is not the white man. The balance of the black man is the black woman. The balance of black people, the only formed or created people in creation, are the unformed people, which are the ancestresses and ancestors who have not taken that form yet. The balance of the black man is the black woman. The white male is a perversion of a black male, not the balance of a male. The white woman is a perversion of a black female, not the balance of a female. White people are the perversions, and Asians and Hindus and so forth, and Arabs are perversions and pseudo-Native Americans are the perversions of the original Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, not the balance of the people. So they don't have any place in creation. Just like cancerous cells are not the balance of healthy cells. They are a perversion of a healthy cell. And because they are perversions, you have an immune system that slates them for destruction because they don't belong. And the same is true. We have a divine immune system in creation that slates those perverted entities for destruction. And that immunity is Benna and Abena, the Abrafo Titere, the chief or head Abrafo, or executioner, divine executioners, and so forth. So that's what we deal with. That's what we're dealing with regard to balance. That which is formed is also that which is good. That which is orderly or ordered by the Supreme Being. That's the key to the cosmology. Order is expressed through law and impressed through hate. The expression of order is divine law. The impression of order is divine hate. So divine hate, you imprint or impress the order or the parameters of order upon creation. You stamp the order, and anything outside of that stamp is destroyed. So you impress order through hate. You repel disorder, so you imprint or impress the created order. That's the contractive pole of divine order. Expression is law, the expansive pole of divine order. So just like inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling is the law, exhaling is the hate. Inhaling, expanding, exhaling, contracting. Inhaling, taking in all the things you need to harmonize your thoughts, intentions, and actions with order, that's expression. And exhaling, destroying or repelling or hating, removing, eradicating all those things, objects, deeds, or entities that will take you out of order, out of balance, all the toxins, all the bacteria, all the criminality that would otherwise make you imbalanced. As long as you have that immune system that's destroying disorder, it maintains the integrity of the divine order. That's the impression of order, while law is the expression of order. So that's the key. When we're talking about law and order, that which is formed, that which is fashioned by the Supreme Being, that is also what is good, that which is ordered. There's no disorder as part of that continuum, from non-order to order, from unformed to formed. That's the only continuum. And then the form, if you have the potter of the clay decides to take the form and return them to the original unformed clay so they can create something else that is sanctioned by the potter, so that's a natural deformation, and return to the original unformed state so that a new form can arise from that because it's sanctioned by the potter. It's like the Supreme Being sanctions the creation of the universe, the creation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. If somebody comes along and tries to pervert us or pervert the world, like the whites and their offspring, polluting the world, polluting our people with genetically modified foods and everything else, that perversity, pollution is not sanctioned by the Supreme Being. It exists, but it's not sanctioned. So therefore, the forms that they come up with are perversions or deformation. And therefore, they're slated for destruction. They're repulsive. So they're not the balance of anything. When you understand that, then you repel them. Their thoughts, their intentions, their actions, their pseudo-culture, pseudo-rationalization. Let's look at one more major example and see what we're talking about. We talk about to illustrate the gravity of the infection. Consider the fact that there are individuals living in Afuraka, Afuraitkait today who hold the insane belief that God is a white man named Jesus. They have pictures of this fictional white character in their villages and homes, and some of these individuals are, like in the Akan culture, Oheni, a king, Ohema, a queen mother, and they're Christian. They've got a picture of a white criminal on their wall talking about that's their savior. But they're the head of a traditional culture and supposedly maintaining the protocols of the traditional culture, but they worship a pseudo-fictional white faggot, dissexual, on a wall talking about that's their savior. But they're a king or a queen mother or a priest or a priestess with a picture of a Jesus hanging on the wall, or just a so-called elder or elder. So some people on the continent today, not just the quote-unquote common people, but the kings, queen mothers, elders, eldresses, and pseudo-spiritualists as well. They hold that insane belief God is a white man named Jesus. They have pictures of this fictional white character in their villages and homes. Some of these individuals were born and raised in Afuraka, Afuraitkait, Africa. They have never traveled outside of their village in their lives. They are descended from people who have lived in these areas for thousands of years. They speak only their indigenous language. They wear only their indigenous clothing, eat only their indigenous foods. They sing and dance, draw water and farm, go to the marketplace and trade, build villages and conduct tribunals, sew garments and tap palm wine, recite proverbs and fashion symbols, all according to the only culture they know, their indigenous Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture. However, the Achiwadye folk took a few of their sons and daughters away from them decades ago and trained them in missionary schools, universities, etc. These individuals then assisted the Achiwadye folk in the translation of the Bible as well as the Quran into the indigenous language. The Achiwadye folk then sent these individuals back to their villages to force the fake religions and foolish doctrines learned in the universities, in humanities class, psychology classes, liberal arts classes, and so forth, moral relativism and all that nonsense, Greek philosophy, foolish doctrines on the people, backed by the threat of military actions against the people as well as economic sanctions. Most of the older people in the village would reject the fake religions and foolish doctrines, philosophies of a white God initially, of course, white prophets, white saints, and so forth. Some would accept them, especially those young and old who were fearful of the military, those who desired to be on the quote-unquote winning team, or those who were disgruntled with the status quo. The result was and is upheaval in the villages, which continued for decades, black-on-black conflict instigated by the whites, powered by their pseudo-philosophies, beliefs, assumptions, and worldviews, etc. As a result, those who have accepted the lies now sit in the midst of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, Africa, never having traveled outside of their village, yet are infected with pseudo-philosophy. Some of these individuals live to become elders and elderesses of their clans and villages. They become the custodians of wisdom, appealed to by others in the village for counsel on all life matters. Yet their philosophy of life is a mixture of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral culture, and perverse doctrine. However, when such individuals in Afuraka, Afuraitkait propound pseudo-philosophy, it appears to the uninformed that what they teach must be the African worldview. When such individuals die, they become uncultivated spirits who often still perpetuate a foolish, perverse worldview to their living relatives. This has occurred intergenerationally for centuries in a certain percentage of cases. We must be absolutely clear that just because someone is from the continent of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, and speaks the language and quote-unquote lives the culture does not mean that they cannot be infected. This reality is demonstrated in Afuraka, Afuraitkait every day by individuals such as those described above. This reality is also demonstrated by similar individuals who accepted the pseudo-religions of Mohammedanism, Islam, and Judaism, Hebrewism centuries ago in West Afuraka, Afuraitkait. We talked about the manuscripts of Timbuktu over 1,000 years ago. That's a 1,000-plus-year-old infection. Brainwashed Negroes who think Hebrewism has something to do with our traditional culture when there were no ancient Hebrews at all ever in existence. There was no Jesus, there was no Muhammad, there was no Moses, there was no Abraham, there was no Isaac or Ishmael. And we proved that in our Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction. You have Negroes who are Igbo, Yoruba, Akan, Ebe, and Fon, and so forth. They've allowed the whites and their offspring to tell them, hey, your culture is actually Hebrew. And these fools want to believe that, and they're walking around talking about they're from the Levitical priesthood and all kinds of nonsense. So we have to teach them the real truth and give the real information. Some of those people pretend as though they're traditional practitioners, but they manifest those infections in thought, in word and deed. It doesn't matter if you have traditional protocols surrounding certain things you do. When you look behind that and look what's in the mind and the philosophy of the individual, you find that they have been infected. Their worldview has been infected. And so that's why we have to bring this real information out. Accepting disorder as part of the continuum of divine order, everything that proceeds from that is the manifestation of the infection of the traditional or proper worldview. As we said earlier, when you can attune to the forces in nature, they are the embodiments of divine order and creation. They cannot operate in disorder at all. They repel disorder. When you attune to them, you're only attuned to order, and when you attune to order, you're in attunement with that which is good, and everything disordered, thoughts, intentions, actions, events, and individuals, including, of course, all of the whites and their offspring, and then those black people who engage life in the similar fashion, corrupt fashion of the whites and their offspring, you reject them as well. Once you recognize them, you recognize where the disorder is, where the order is, and how to repel the disorder. So we go into detail about that. We already talked about here, we already went over what's here next in this section, talking about how people conscript these discarnate, perverse ancestral spirits, were criminal during lifetime, manipulative during lifetime, and they use those kinds of spirits to work with them and so forth after they make their transition, attach them to talismans, attach them to shrines, pass them off as deities, and then when they engage in all kinds of insane, perverse behavior and philosophies, then people say, man, this must be the African worldview because these spirits said we need to do this. This must be the proper view of the world. And then you start trying to make your worldview fit their perverse actions, and then you start fashioning a brand new corrupt worldview based on the actions of some criminal spirits that these pseudo-spiritualists are forcing on you. So we get into some detail about that on page 57 and 58. So we don't have to go through all of that information. We just detail that whole notion. But then we get down to the other section. We talk about good and order. Of course, it's the balance, as we said, of non-order. That which is unformed balances out that which is formed. Then we went through some detail dealing with that. We want to get down to the absolute truth of the matter. So let's scroll down to page, get down, I think it's page 62. So we talk about non-order and order. Unformed and formed balance one another out. Uncreated and created balance one another out. Female and male, of course, balance one another out. Of course, birth and death, not life and death. Birth is an event. You live in the physical world. Death is an event. You live in the spirit world. Then you're born again through the gate of birth to live in the physical world. Then you go through the gate of death to live in the spirit world. Life is continuous through both realms. Birth and death are opposites, not life and death. Just like male and female are opposites, Afurakani males and Afuraitkaitnit females are complementary opposites. Non-black people are not the balance of black people. They have no part in that balance of the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnit female. They are perversions of our people, not the balance of our people. So we talk about male and female contraction and expansion, divine law, and divine hate. So we say disorder is the perversion of order, not the complement. Evil is the perversion of good, not the complement. Wrong is the perversion of right, not the complement. What is orderly is what is good and what is right. So whatever is right is what is in harmony with order. What is the balance of order, or what is formed, what is created by the Supreme Being, that which is not yet created or uncreated or unformed, non-order. The balance of order is non-order. The balance of what is created by the Supreme Being is that which is not yet created or not yet formed, the unformed clay, the unformed matter. The balance of order is non-order. The balance of good Good and order is the same thing. So that which is not yet ordered is the balance of order or balance of that which is good. That which is ordered is what is good. That which is right is what is ordered. The balance is what is right with regard to the Supreme Being is that which is not yet created, because everything that is created by the Supreme Being is right, is good, is order. So the balance of that is only that which is not yet created. Wrong is the perversion of right, not the balance of right. Evil is the perversion of good, not the balance of what is good. Disorder is the perversion of order, not the balance of it. That which is malformed, malformation is the perversion of that which is formed, not the complement. Lust is the perversion of law or love, not the complement. Malice, an evil intent, is the perversion of hate. Hate is the divine destruction of disorder for the purpose of maintaining the divine order. Your immune system is the hate vehicle that destroys cancer cells in order to maintain the divine order of your body. Malice is an evil intent to destroy something in a disordered fashion, irrespective of divine order. You're not trying to maintain order when you're malicious. You're just destroying things because you want to destroy them. When you have divine hate, you're destroying things that are disrupting divine order. So that's a divine function. Malice is the perversion of hate, not the complement. Falsehood is the perversion of truth. It's not the balance of truth. What is true is what is good. It's the same thing. What is good is what is ordered. So therefore the balance of order is non-order. The balance of truth is that which has not yet been formed, because as soon as something is formed by the Supreme Being, it's automatically true, it's automatically good, it's automatically right, it's automatically ordered. So it balances that which is not yet ordered, because as soon as it's ordered, it's already true, right, good, and balanced. Falsehood is the perversion. If you look at those different things, they're all perversions and not the balance of these things. Whites and our offspring will say, well, no, disorder is the balance of order. Evil is one half of the good. Wrong is half of right. And evil and falsehood is part of truth, and you have to have both. You're not balanced. These are perverse entities trying to tell you what you need to have as part of balance. But the proper worldview, the view of creation as it is, attunement to divine order, and that which undergirds divine order. So that is the key. So we detail those various things, and then there are a number of statements that you will hear, and now you'll be able to reject them outright. And because you have the foundation to understand why they're out of harmony with what the worldview is. And the worldview of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people is simply Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, meaning divine order. That is our worldview. We reject disorder, we incorporate order. We accept divine order, we reject disorder. We accept or we love order, and we hate disorder. We incorporate law, and we restore balance to our lives when imbalance has occurred. So when you hear these statements, we put a number of different statements that you'll find from people on the continent as well as here. I was born and raised in Africa. I know the culture. That means nothing. I am an initiated priest or priestess. That means nothing. I was initiated in Africa. That means nothing. I'm a fifth-generation Nigerian Babalawo. That means nothing. I'm a direct descendant of Ifa, Shango, etc. I have the Vodou in my family. I came from a long line of priests and priestesses. I've been enthroned or installed as a king, chief, chieftainess, queen mother in Africa. I've lived in Ghana at the shrine of the Abosom for 7 years. I speak the language. I have repatriated to Africa. I am a Zulu shaman. I have been sanctioned by the elders in Africa to teach the foreigners. I have studied at the feet of masters. I've been given the authority to reveal sacred mysteries hitherto unknown outside of the African bush. I have been possessed by spirits. I have heard the spirits speak, and I have seen them and felt them. The spirits obey my command. I do divination and get results sometimes or usually. That's always parenthetically. They don't tell you about the negative results. They blame those on the client. I have healed people. That doesn't mean anything because a criminal can heal people. A criminal can be a neurosurgeon and and remove a tumor and then stab somebody to death. So healing in and of itself does not mean you're connected with the Abosom. I have done sacrifices for people. I have seen the future. I was the first to be initiated, the first to receive a shrine, the first to establish a temple, the first to bring the tradition from Africa, etc. Initiation, priesthood, priestesshood, lineage, length of time on the continent of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, length of study with infected continental so-called elders and eldresses, disembodied spirit experiences, memorization of language and of ritual practices, receiving titles, quote-unquote authority, receiving intermittent assistance from wayward spirits, from medicinal healing advice, and through divination, trumpeting the good results of divination but rationalizing the bad results and blaming the client for the bad results, irrelevant, quote-unquote, first. All of these are absolutely meaningless so-called credentials right along with people who say, well, I have a degree, so therefore I know. All of that is meaningless. Afurakani, Afuraitkait rejects them and the fools who propound them. Ma'al, Maat is Ma'al, Ma'at. Law is law. Truth is truth. Our conscious connection to, incorporation, and expression of Ma'al and Ma'at, and our repulsion of disfet or disorder through the impression of chi, divine hate, is the measure of our spiritual and cultural integrity as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. Those who Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit who do not understand the proper balance of non-order and order, that order, good, and right are the same concept, and that truth is absolute, are those who do not understand Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, divine order, and hence their own culture. And that's why we say Amamre, or culture, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral culture, belongs to those Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who refuse to profane the truth transmitted to us by Nyamewa, Nyame, through the agency of the Abosom and our Nananum Nsamafo. So we gave our identity and our culture rooted in our identity as spirits of order. And when you understand divine order, then you understand the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit worldview, and you don't begin to infect that proper worldview with these pseudo-notions of moral relativism and other kinds of nonsense, pseudo-religions, pseudo-cultural practices from the whites and their offspring, trying to infect our culture with that and make that part of the fabric of the worldview. Do not be fooled by pseudo-royals, pseudo-priests and priestesses. Every title or credential means absolutely nothing. It means nothing to your ancestresses and ancestors and the people connected to you by blood. Only thing that's important, what does Inyamewa Nyame have to say? What does the Abosom connected to you by blood have to say? What does your own Kra, your Krawa have to say? What does your Nananom Nsamanfo, your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors have to say about these matters? That's the only thing that's important. And if anybody tries to direct you away from your own Nananom Nsamanfo, and the Abosom connected to you by blood, to follow along with them in contradiction to what your own people say, you reject those fools, no matter what their titles are, no matter what their lineage is, because they're meaningless. You reject them and embrace your own people. That's what the real worldview is. We have carried this within our blood wherever we have gone on earth, whether we migrated on our own thousands of years ago around the world and carried our culture, or if we were forced to migrate through the Musuo Kesie enslavement, or even on the continent forced into certain areas because of colonization. A colonized Afurakani, Afuraitkait mind is an enslaved Afurakani, Afuraitkait mind. Enslaved on the landmass itself. The only difference between colonization and enslavement is enslavement, you're enslaved on another land outside of the continent. Colonization, you were enslaved on the same landmass. So when people have straight hair and lightening their skin, wearing colored contacts, having European names but yet calling themselves traditionalists, going to church, believing in the Bible and the Quran, and Talmud and Hinduism and Buddhism and all this other nonsense, yet calling themselves traditional, you know you have a colonized mind pretending to be traditional. So you reject those Negroes and you embrace your own culture, your real culture. That's the real worldview. So, yet I say it's 11:45. So, okay, and there was one quick question. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. There was a question here. Says, Tigare is an abosom of war. What you heard me say was the abrafo titire, Titire, which means abrafo titire is talking about the chief, the head abrafo, not tigare, titire. So, and that's just the title of the chief abrafo, the chief divine executioner. No, tigare is not an abosom at all, and he's not Akan either. He's correct. He's a Guan spirit, a discarnate Guan spirit. So we have a question on the phone line, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay, Michio, you had a question or comment?
Yes. Could you hear me?
Yeah, speak up a little bit, just a little bit.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Heads up. It's Amma from CT.
Heads up. How you doing?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm good.
Okay. I just have a quick question. It's just a little random, but spiritual fasting, is that a part of our culture, our ancestral religion, or, did we get that concept from, fake religions?
You mean just fasting from food for spiritual purposes?
Yeah. Or, maybe some people, they might, leave out food. Maybe they might just do just raw foods for a certain period of time, or, do a different type of fasting. But do, for spiritual reasons, is that a part of our religion?
Yeah, no, that's always been a part of the culture in different ways. So different forms of fasting or abstaining from food or abstaining from other things. That's a form of sacrifice in a sense. And it's when you get that food out of your system and you're cleaned out, and sometimes we'll take herbs and things like that to cleanse our bodies out as well internally, as well as not digesting food for a while. So you have all the energy that you normally use to break down food. You have a little abundance of energy, extra energy to utilize for ritual purposes. So people not only will abstain from food for a certain period, a couple of days or however many days it is. Sometimes during certain ritual practices, people abstain from sexual activity to preserve that energy before they engage in a ritual practice and so forth. So various kinds of fasting have always been part of ritual culture. And in fact, the whites and their offspring when you learn about the monastic tradition of, these early, quote unquote, early church fathers, and they're fasting, and they were monks and so forth. All they were doing were imitating what they were seeing in the temples of ancient Kemet. They took those same practices, them wearing long clothes and abstaining from food and going out to the desert and engaging in meditation and stuff like that. They were simply imitating what they learned about seeing priests and priestesses doing in the temples of ancient Kemet, but of course they associate that with fictional cartoon characters like Jesus and later with Muhammad and these other characters. But the whole notion of abstention to preserve energy and then utilize that energy for ritual purpose, that's part of the culture.
Okay. All right. Manasseh.
Okay. Yenny, I said it. We appreciate the call.
No problem.
it is actually 11:50. So we're going to have to end now. If you have a question, send us an email with your question, and then we can answer it because we do have to end now. But we will be back on tomorrow. We will send out a notification for that for individuals who are still who came in a little bit later. Again, we do have our Akongwasuya Dai, our campaign for our Akongwasuya, which is our institution. We've had this institution, all of the books that we publish, all of the information that we put forward, the trainings, workshops, ritual methods, and so forth, everything you see on the website is born of our institution. We've had that since we were in Chicago, and now we're in D.C. We've had to rent out different places whenever we do presentations or have a class, something like that. What we're doing now is we're working to acquire a space where we can have a permanent space to have all of the classes, including live streaming these classes for people who can't physically come to the institution. But we'll be able to expand the classes. We'll be able to expand our service to the community with regard to employment and entrepreneurship training, as well as workshops for Afurakani manhood, for behavioral health professionals, and so forth. Just a number of different things, ritual practices, communal gatherings, and everything. So we're trying to do that. We have that campaign for our Akongwasuya institution on our website. Go to the ODWIRA.com website for Akongwasuya. You'll see it there on the front page. You can donate there. Anybody who makes a donation, we will send you one or more of our books. And you can also purchase our books directly from our Nhoma page on our website. Any book purchase, of course, assists us to help fund this project. Any donation, any book, and anybody who makes a $15 donation or more anyway, we're going to send you a book anyway. So it's not just a free donation. You're always going to get something for it. So one or more, depending on how much the donation is, one or more of our 15 books. And then also with the books, sometimes people, whether they're overseas or even here, would like to order all of the books. They only range between $8 and $11. So if you order 10 books or more, like 10 of our 15 books, or 11, or some people, or 12, or some people order the whole 15-book set, any 10 books or more, automatically you get 30% off. So, for example, if you ordered the first 10 books that we have, instead of paying $96 for 10 books, you would pay $66 for 10 books, which is basically $6.60 per book, automatic 30% off. And that's true for 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 or 14 or 15. And we have separate buttons on the website for a 10-book set, 11-book set, 12-book set, 13-book set, 14-book set, and the whole 15-book set, all 30% off. But individually, they range between $8 and $11. We have one book that's $8. About 8 of them are $9. 5 of them are $10, and 1 of them is $11. So that's the price range. Information that is relevant, including the book we were reading from tonight, as well as all the books that we go through on the show. So supporting those softcover publications will support the work that we are doing and allow us to expand, especially with regard to assisting and employing our people and promoting entrepreneurship immediately with our people. So Yedate, we thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And we will be sending out a notification for tomorrow's show. Check with us on YouTube. We're ODWIRA on YouTube. Subscribe to us so you can automatically get any update. Anytime we post a new video, like we posted a new video a couple of days ago, you'll automatically get the update if you subscribe. You'll get a notification saying a new video is there. Subscribe to us. Follow us here on the Blog Talk channel. That way we can send one email out, and everybody will get it at the same time, letting you know when the show is coming on, who's going to be on the show, and what the topic is going to be. And then we also have our social network, Afuraka-Afuraitkait.ning.com. So, again, Yedate, we thank you, and we will connect with you tomorrow. Yebeshiabio, we will meet again. That's it.